Already? Did you really?
I was late just now. Really? Yeah. I added like, because I printed this out together in those.
Oh, yeah. You've been on a month now, right?
Yeah, for a month.
Don't even
Go the other direction. I am
Yeah,
like
you
this right for this.
want me to
Sure.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, he was like, we should go over to I'm sorry.
See-
I said
see
it
my-
last week, so I'm
I'd be happy to. My neighbors. While you're here.
Okay.
Or when you go.
Y'all are my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
Voted on the budget.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
I'm just having back and I'll wait there for a moment.
Okay. Hello, sir. Madam?
hello, long time no see.
I had to go get my monkey suit.
I'll come do that.
All right.
Baby's ready. What? I haven't seen it, so it. This is a yeah, it is. So if it's not, there isn't another representative, then it will be Paul, and then Fletch is Ron.
All right. Welcome to our city council meeting tonight, January 16th, 2019. We will begin with an invocation by Mountain View Baptist Church. Is there anyone here from there? Church? I didn't see anyone. Okay, then we will have our invocation by Councilman Cousins, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilman Adams.
Our Father in heaven, as we gather this evening to this city council meeting, we express our gratitude and for many wonderful blessings. We're grateful for those who are not to participate in this meeting. We pray that we may have civility and good discussion and debate this evening. We pray that thou would bless us continually with the blessings we need and deserve. We thank thee, Father in heaven, for the moisture we've recently received and the goodness it brings to the land. We pray that we may continue to receive that which we need. We're so very thankful for our city staff and employees and law enforcement and first responders. We pray that would bless and be with them and keep them safe. So very grateful for their service. We express our gratitude and appreciate all that we have and enjoy. Grateful for our beautiful community and the freedoms we enjoy. And we offer this prayer humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. All rise. Follow me in the pledge of allegiance to our flag. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we will now move on to our agenda order approval. Are there any items the council would like changed from the published agenda? And if not, can I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve the agenda order.
Second. Oh, sorry, Councilman. Go ahead and second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, council business? There any? Yes.
Mayor, I want to take a minute and give a report on some things with water. We, for the last 2 years, we've been meeting. So the state engineer, Kent Jones, he's has the responsibility in the state of Utah to ensure that our basins that we live in have adequate water for our future generations. That's his duty, is to enforce that. He's been wonderful to work with, but they are firm in these mandates. And so Paul Bittman and I have served for the last 2 years on what they call a groundwater management plan. In Cedar City, our safe yield is 28,000 or 21,000 acre feet. So any of the water that comes off the mountain in the form of precipitation, rainfall, whatever, that goes in the ground, they deem that we can take that much out. And that's 21,000 acre feet. We use 28,000 acre feet each year right now, and it's climbing. And so we're about 7,000 acre feet in the hole every year. And so the state engineer he came in a couple of years ago, had some public meetings, and said we need to figure out what to do to bring this into balance. And so we took a 3-tiered approach with conservation, with recharge, and with importing new water in the valley. And we've been working on those things for a lot of years, and it's been very exciting and successful. But I wanted to give a report on, we're coming to the end of this 2-year stint as a committee. I don't know, Paul, much longer we'll meet, but as we've gone through this, we've given a lot of input as a committee as to what might happen in this plan. And I want to read something here. So Cedar City, and I went over this with the state engineer's office, the figures could be off a little bit because some of the water prior to 1934 priority may not be being used. So there could be some compression and some things that move a little bit. So some of these are approximate, but they're pretty close. So, and some of these figures are actual diversion. So there's depletion and diversion. It's complicated, but diversion is actually what we can use. But Cedar City owns approximately 11,500 acre feet of consumable water, and that would be diversion water. Currently, the city consumes about 5,500 acre feet of water each year, so about half that. And I mentioned safe yield for the valley is 21,000 acre feet per year. The state engineer is currently pursuing a groundwater management plan to bring the valley water use to safe yield. Valley use, as I mentioned, is 28,000 acre feet, but there's 51,000 acre feet on the books. So we're using 28, but there's 51,000 acre feet out there that could be used that's not. And that's what's on the books. If the state engineer were to cut water rights based on priority, the safe yield date is 1934. So if he came in and said, I want to draw the line at a priority date here to bring this basin into balance, that's what it would be. And so, and I'm not trying to alarm anybody here, but I've spent quite a bit of time this week in this. So if that line was drawn at 1934, 1875,000 acre feet, 1,875 acre feet of water rights would be an earlier priority. So if they cut it at 1934, out of the 11,500 available, we would have 1,875 left. So this means that 84% of Cedar City water rights would have a priority date later than 1934. That could be in jeopardy. Currently, the city is depleting approximately 3 times more water than they would be able to if the priority cut was made at 1934. For 2 years, we've had this groundwater management plan committee, which I said Paul and I sit on. We've been negotiating with the state engineer to provide a gradual implementation for priority cuts. His initial response has been to give us 10 years before he curtails water rights by priority. We have asked for 20 years, but he is resistant to the idea because he doesn't want to see the aquifer continue to drop dramatically before a solution is implemented. If the 15-year cutoff is put into effect, which is probably, I feel, where he might land, and some of the hints I've been given, we would lose about half of our water rights and put us using a little more water than we have rights to, not even factoring in growth until the cuts come now or after. My impression is that the state engineer is going to tighten the screws enough that it will encourage Cedar City to begin implementing solutions without creating a crisis. But if no action is taken, the crisis could come. So the bottom line,
we need to consider, Cedar City needs to continue to conserve water. Unfortunately, when Cedar City conserves water, we only use about 20% of the water. The agriculture community uses about 80% of it. So if we conserve as a community, it doesn't make as big of a difference as we would hope, but it's still good. We need to focus on acquiring early priority water rights, which the city's been doing. We need to reuse water that's being wasted. We have about 2,800 acre feet of water that we send to the wastewater treatment plant each year. And that water needs to be reused. We've talked about taking that water, sending it to some farmers that they could put in their pivots to water their crops, and then have them idle their wells. And in effect, you're recharging the aquifer by doing that. And that's something we just had a study done by Corolla engineers. And that's an exciting thing that I hope we can move quickly on. We've been doing a lot of recharge projects over the last quite a few years. That's been successful. And another thing that we could be forced to do is this crisis, if it came to pass, which I'm really worried about, is we would have to go out and buy and dry farms. We'd have to go out the agriculture community, buy their farms, buy their water, and put that water to use. The other thing, and the thing we've been working on for about 7 years, well, 10 years ago, we filed on water rights in the West Desert. And that's something that we are working on diligently, or have been. I just resigned from the Central Iron County Water Conservancy District as a board member after 7 years. But for the last 7 years, we've been working on that project. And the first leg of that would be going to Pine Valley, which would bring about 15,000 acre feet of water to this valley, but at a cost of about $250 million. And my point in bringing this up is that there's also some staggering numbers of where we are right now in this valley with water. And I hope that as a council and as a community, as a county, that we continue to look at, that we don't keep kicking this can down the road. I mean, there's needs and there's wants. And we need to look really carefully at how we spend our money going forward when we have such a present demand right now. The most important thing we have is water. And I hope that now that we've got our study done, I hope that we can move quickly and aggressively to some of the lower hanging fruit, like the wastewater treatment plant water that we can put back in the ground and use. And it's going to take all of us to solve this problem. And it's going to take money, and it's going to take effort. And I just wanted to report on that tonight, on what's going on, so the community knows. I hope that, and I know we've got this room really full tonight and people are passionate about certain issues. I hope that we can become as passionate in this community about water as we are as some of the other things we're discussing. So thank you.
Great. Are there any other comments? Yes.
I had a couple of questions on the bills that we were paying this week. Is this the time I should ask
Sure.
about that, since it's not an agenda?
Yeah.
Just a couple of things. I noticed that there was payment for Ashtown Brothers down on the 800 West Coal Creek Road. Have we started cutting that through, or was that for work?
That was actually for their improvements they put in last fall. They've just been delayed in getting us a bill.
Okay, all right. What is the schedule? I've had several people ask me about that. What is the time schedule on that?
Well, that'll happen just as development happens down along that corridor.
Okay, thanks. A couple of other things. There was roofing on the Heritage Center that was $26,000. Can you remind me what we negotiated with the county to pay on that project?
They paid us $35,000. The total project was $70,000.
Okay, and it's all done now, right?
Yeah, we're done, right? Yeah, we're
Okay.
done.
And then
No leaks, I hope.
yes.
We have the rainfall to test.
I've seen those.
One other thing, I was just wondering about the landfill costs that we pay the county to use their landfill. How often do we renegotiate that contract? Or is it a negotiable thing, or do they just bill us, or how does that work?
We negotiated some better pricing when we had to switch the biosolids at the wastewater plant, just based on the volume of material we were taking out there. The other tipping fee, my understanding is that's a county fee set by the county. I don't think we negotiate that.
Okay.
I'm sure they listen, but
All
they
right.
have to set it to meet their operations.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other comments, questions? No? Okay. Then we will move to staff comments. Darren?
Mayor and Council, Chief Adams, out of respect for our board members of Iron County Police Canines, one of them has a demonstration in about 10 minutes at SU. Could we have them go first and then we can follow them?
Sure.
If you want to move into public comment, then we can follow them, if that's all
You
right.
can just do it all under staff.
Okay.
You can do that too. I say no to him quite frequently.
Good evening, Jason Thomas. We're here on behalf of Friends of Iron County Police Canine. It's an organization that we started years back when I was a dog handler for Cedar City because we needed some extra resources to help us with training, equipment. I had 2 dogs pass away, helped with the cremation is what we did for them, but helped to honor them. And we found a need within our community of people that wanted to help in that process and wanted to be a part of. And we've since, thanks to Ree and Ran Zafiropoulos, we do fundraisers around where we can show off these dogs and show what they can do, but yet show, what those needs are. We've been very fortunate with the community. The community has really supported us and we want to give back. And so we decided that we wanted to donate $2,500 towards the new animal shelter. We felt like that fell within things that we were trying to accomplish with our organization. And so we're here to present that big check. We have a big marker to endorse it, but we want to give that to you tonight.
Come on up.
And we have, just so we know, we have members of our board here, canine handlers, Sheriff Carpenter, Lieutenant Slosher, Sergeant Bauer, Ree, as you know, Clint Pollock from Cedar City, Brenda, who we should, as far as she'll be our newest handler at Iron County Sheriff's Office. She will be getting her dog in the next couple of weeks. But who else? Back there, Roland. Who can forget Roland? But anyway, we're appreciative of the community, and we want to give back in our way as well.
Well, thank you.
Ree, do you want to take a photo? You look better with a
Okay, ready? Smile.
photo.
Does anyone else want in the picture?
It looks like he just came in from the cold.
Island behind on the step.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys won't be in it if you're on the side. You gotta get really in there.
Where's the dog?
Yeah.
Duck behind.
Last time I had my dog here, he tried to eat Nina. I'm not here.
I think I'm in here too, though, already.
Keep smiling. I'm almost done. Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
We didn't have any food in there.
Oh, all right. I'll take care
Can I
of
just
that.
say how much we appreciate your efforts on behalf of the animal shelter and your support of all the canines and the animals here. We're working diligently to try and raise additional funds. And to everybody in the audience and everybody, all 6 of you watching us on the live stream, we're still raising funds. So don't forget us out there, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now back to Darren.
Chief Adams again. I just wanted to take a moment and highlight some great work that's being done by Stephanie Furnival, the executive director of the Children's Justice Center. I think she's the one that deserves the credit, but she probably would put some of that on her staff in writing this VOCA grant that has allowed us to have a victim's advocate, both in the sheriff's office with Sheriff Carpenter and in the police department. And so Brianna Garrett here, if you'll just raise your hand, is placed in the sheriff's office. She's the grant coordinator and an advocate there. And then Liz Soriano is in our office. So I'm going to ask Stephanie to come up and just talk briefly about what she did and what this program is about and the huge and beneficial impact that will have in our community. So Stephanie, don't forget to state your name.
Good evening. So what I've
Will you
done.
still say your name?
Yes, Stephanie Furnival.
Thank you.
So what I've done is there was some VOCA funds, and VOCA is federal funding that comes from the Victims of Crime Act. So when there's any type of like a federal fine that, you know, either a corporation receives or an individual, then that funding actually goes into a fund that is to support victims of crime through lots of different things, through therapy, through medical, through dental, and as well as supporting victim advocates around the country as well. With our current administration, they've actually really went in and has really started collecting a lot of those federal fundings. That's been really like outstanding. And so to give you an idea of kind of like what that funding looked like, 2 years ago, the state of Utah kind of on a norm was receiving about $4 million a year. Last year it went to 25 and this year it went to 30 million. So that's a huge increase in regards to funding that's available. I had been approached by the staff of VOCA, which is out of Salt Lake City, because they felt like we really needed some victim advocates that are service-based. Those advocates are advocates that work within law enforcement. So I had approached Chief Adams and Sheriff Gower at the time and had asked them about, you know, what they thought about it, that we needed to, you know, write a grant. The grant is typically 2 years, and then you apply every 2 years. However, most of the time, as long as there's funding available, they're really great at working with you because they really want to have those victim advocates out there for the community. And so I had approached them and asked them about how they felt about it. And they were super excited, but didn't know how to write a grant. So I just had offered up that I wrote several of these grants. And so I was happy to do so. So we were able to get it. The one that we received was just for a 1 year because it was like halfway through the year when they had put the RFP out. And so we went ahead and applied for it. It's a little bit under $147,000. And so that funding was able to put a full-time victim advocate in the sheriff's office, as well as a full-time victim advocate in the Cedar City Police Department's office. What's nice about that is their salary is actually 100% funded through the VOCA funds and 85% of their benefits. So the county and the city are just paying 15% of their benefits, which comes to about, I think, was it $6,000 a year. So that's a pretty nice benefit to have a full-time employee and only having to put that much out, you know, with like local funding. So the next grant cycle so this grant cycle ends the end of June. And the next one will start July 1, and then that one will be for 2 years. And so in April, we'll reapply for Bree and Elizabeth's positions, as well as really taking a look. We've had an opportunity by then to collect some data to see like how many cases that they have, what does their workload look like, as well as we've reached out to Enoch and Parowan as well, because when they look at the population of Iron County, those that are in the VOCA office, they're thinking that we should have anywhere from 4 to 6 advocates based on our population. And so, but we wanted to start out with just 2, kind of get an idea about, you know, how things were going to go. And so possibility that we may be adding additional victim advocates as well. And I believe that Bree, you pulled numbers today. So Bree has been working for the county for about 2.5 months, and Elizabeth is a month and a half. And so what are you at, 67? So they've had 64 cases just in that amount of time. And so I feel like they've done a really great job. You know, we've got Canyon Creek, who helps with domestic violence and sexual assault, and they'll still continue to do that. And then the Children's Justice Center, we have victim advocates for children who are experiencing abuse, and we'll continue to work with their family as well. But there's always those other victims out there, victims to identity fraud, burglary, robbery. I mean, so many other different crimes where they're just kind of not getting that extra support. And so that's where they step in and just really help out. So,
great.
Any questions at all?
Any questions?
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's great.
Well done.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your support. Thanks. Do you have anything else? Okay. Staff comments? Yes.
Brian Dangerfield, Director of Events, at least for one more day. I wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you to this community for the support you've shown for the many events that we put on. Some of the best friends I've had in my whole life is here in Cedar City. I'll be moving to Florida, and with some trepidation, leaving behind such great people and great support from elected officials and staff. And I want to say thanks to the hundreds of volunteers that we have to put on events. The police and the volunteer police we have, and the firefighters that help us, and and the sheriff's department here that was here tonight too. This community is so amazing the volunteer spirit we have here. And I hope that that continues, and I'll be keeping an eye on Cedar City and the years to come. But I just want to say thanks to the community and for the opportunity, for trusting this opportunity to be the director of events and leisure services for a little while as well. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Thanks,
Brian, thank you for your service very much.
Are there any other staff comments? Okay, we will move to the public comment portion. Then, if there is anyone that would like to address the council about an item not on the agenda.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Adam Hahn. I'm the president of the Iron County Home Builders Association. And every year, well, throughout the year, we gather information on the building industry. And so this, I was able to obtain the numbers for this past year, and I thought they were interesting, so I thought I'd bring you some information for your consideration. Overall, this last in 2018, the residential building industry in Iron County was up 19%. In Cedar City, it was up 23%. Okay, total permits pulled, evaluation. Now this number is a conservative number. I've talked to a couple of builders that are on the list of where it shows their evaluations through the year, and one of them said his number was 30% low. So this is a conservative number, but this last year, the construction industry put $129 million into Iron County. Construction is the largest contributor to the tax base in Iron County. A lot of people say that the college is the largest employer, which it is the largest single employer, but the construction industry is the largest single industry that employs the residents of Iron County. So as you go through this next year and through the years to come, and you plan for growth and you plan for changes to the local laws, and I would ask that you take this into consideration, that anything that will hurt the building industry will hurt the general economy and will hurt Iron County and Cedar City as a whole. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Are there any other public comments? No. Okay, then we will get into our business agenda. We are going to try to keep all of our public hearings orderly and as concise as possible, since there are a bunch of them, plus a number of you are here for other agenda items. So item number 1, public hearing to consider an ordinance amending the zone from dwelling multiple units R-3-M to highway service to mixed use for property located at 237 North 400 West.
Good evening, staff and council and mayor. We don't have a pointer. We don't have a map anyways. So we have
I haven't said your name yet.
Arlo Foster with Go Civil Engineering.
Tom giggles.
I know, and I've got the laser pointer, so he better watch out. So we have a property that's just right off of 200 North, just east of, I believe that's North Elementary. And currently it's zoned highway service and R3, and the owners would like to expand their daycare, and to do that they want to change their zoning to mixed use that would allow them a little more commercial application than currently is allowed.
Can you tell me, if I read through some of the planning commission notes right, this property is split in the middle, where a portion of it is highway service and the other portion is what is it, R3?
Right. It's not as uncommon as you would think. It happens quite often where a zone boundary ends up kind of halfway in between properties.
We just get pencils out and we just draw funny lines to.
Yeah, I don't know how it happens, but yes, it's fairly common. I've seen it. So yeah, this cleans that zone up. And then, like I said, it just allows the owners a little more flexibility with their property.
Are there other?
This is just a zone change request because the general land use plan is already calling for it to be mixed use.
Mm-hmm. Will they just be remodeling? Are they building a new building, or do you even know what that is yet?
Not entirely. It is a fairly good sized building on the lot right now. Currently with it's a residence, and so they're capped out at 16 with their daycare, and they'd like to expand that a little bit more. And so I don't know that they want to bulldoze or do anything with that, but if they needed to do an addition or anything like that, they would consider that.
And I know daycare has different kind of regulations relative to safety and different things, but I couldn't help but think it's right there by 200 North. And I just want to make sure that, everything's okay and that we don't have small children out there on a very busy highway. And, but they've had it for some time, and I think they've done a great job. So I don't see any problem with that. It's just always a concern.
You realize there is an elementary school, right?
I do. And we've seen what we've done there with chain link fences and blinking lights and parents lined up for blocks to pick up their kids and other neighbors angry because they're lined up to pick up their kids. Yeah, I've seen it all.
Just reminding you that there actually is an elementary school. And
Been there, done that.
Right. It's that one right there.
okay.
School is.
Yeah, and then the school's just right. Well, it's right here now.
So as far as you know, it's going to continue to be a home-based
Correct.
daycare.
Yeah. They just want to expand what they're doing right now.
All right. Are there any other questions from council? No? Okay, then we will open this public hearing. If there's anyone that would like to address the council. Okay, seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and put this on our action agenda for next week. All right, item number 2, a public hearing to consider an ordinance amending the general land use plan for medium density residential and business and light manufacturing to real estate's residential property located in the vicinity of 231 West, 3000 North.
Good evening, Bob Platt, Platt Engineering. This is out at 3000 North, just north of Old Farm Subdivision. Part of this property is in the airport traffic pattern zone, but the request is to it's presently, well, first we got to change the general land use plan, but ultimately the request is to be rural estates so that they can preserve a little bit of livestock use that they have on the property.
Kit, is this the same piece of property we looked at sometime in the last 12 months? One of our employees was looking at
yes.
buying. Is it the same piece?
Yeah, it is the same piece.
That's what I thought.
Right here by Old Farm, in this area right in here.
Because didn't we deem at that point that we couldn't convert that to residential because it's in that airport zone?
Well, part of it is, but there's part of it that's out of it, and that's where they're going to build their house.
Okay, because the prior ones wanted to build over in the east corner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's absolutely no plan to, be in the airport traffic pattern zone.
Okay.
Make that perfectly clear. Yes. So it's very low density because they're asking for residential estates.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, that's what they were asking for before, but they were building on the other side of the property, on the east side. So.
Well, that's not the plan.
Okay.
All right, are there other comments or questions from the council or staff? No? Okay, then we'll open the public hearing on this item. And seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and move this to the action agenda. Item number 3, public hearing to consider an ordinance amending the zone from annex transition to residential estates for property located in the vicinity of 231 West, 3000 North.
Yes, Bob Platt. This is a zone change request associated therewith.
Same property.
Same property, same.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any new questions from the council? No, still none? All right, we'll open the public hearing. All right, then we will close the public hearing and this will go on our action agenda. Okay, item number 4, consider an ordinance amending chapter 34 by limiting the requirements to operate a taxi cab in Cedar City.
Afternoon. My name is John Word, owner of Soul Taxi.
So, Mr. Word, you correct me if I'm wrong, but Mr. Word had worked with Randall to come up with some suggestions on changing the ordinance that deals with the requirements to get a taxi cab permit, driver's permit in the city. So Mr. Word's recommending that right now, as the ordinance reads, if you were to have a theft within the last 5 years, you wouldn't qualify. Or if you were to have a drug offense in the last 5 years, you wouldn't qualify. He would like that amended to say felony theft or felony drugs. He would also like some language required that, or some language added that requires some surveillance equipment that's recording what goes on inside the cab. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then he would like an easier pathway to get a temporary permit. So right now we require essentially 5 things to get the permit, and that's some references, a certificate saying that the driver's medically sound to be able to operate. There's getting a background check, which can take some time, and then getting a certified driving record and a proof of the driver's license. So other than the background check, the other 4 can get done.
Oh, right away, no problem. Yeah. Background takes a while, and some drivers don't really adhere to my standards anyway. So having a month to get them trained or see how I think they'll be in town, we were useful if I can say, well, 2 weeks you've been here, I don't see it working out. Let them go versus going through all this headache and money and time spent literally for nothing. I mean, just because they pass everything doesn't mean they're going to be a good employee anyway. So I have time to decide if they're even worth having on the company at all.
John, what would happen if you had some kind of a temporary thing where you did hire them on a temporary basis and you found out the background check was not?
It means they lied to me, so they're gone regardless.
Okay, that was my question. So what is your biggest problem you're having with this? I mean, why has this become an issue for you to come before us?
There's not enough people in town that really want to drive a taxi, and some that do are, some of them will say they had a small lapse in judgment a couple years prior. Say it was a small theft or it was a small drug charge, something that's not really a major life-altering decision. Stupid of their part, yes, but I like to see if I can give them another chance to help them out with a job and working for a better future. I had a couple employees who did sadly have that issue. They were working for me. I let them go after I found out some things on them, but in the last 2 months I had them, they were ideal employees. I had many customers who constantly said they loved that driver, and when they were gone, we're kind of upset that, well, what happened to them? Well, ordinances required this, and had the ones that the change I suggested were in place, they could still be here because it's been like a year and a half or 2 years prior. But with the 5 years, it's a little excessive, especially when there's no, it's one blanket statement. Again, whether it was a small offense or a major offense, it's the same regardless. Mm-hmm. So for me, having multiple offenses, yeah, then there clearly need to be a longer time frame. But a one-time offense that happened, a year or 2 ago shouldn't be as looked upon as a felony or, how to say it, a small candy bar versus, anything major theft.
I would assume that your hours can be flexible for your taxi cab drivers, can't they? I mean,
more or less.
I mean, you set a schedule clearly, but somebody could work a 3-hour shift and then do something and come back, and assuming you have the drivers. Is that true?
Kind of ish.
Kind of ish.
So yes.
I guess what I'm asking is, you say you're having a hard time finding drivers. I mean, there's thousands of students at the university who are looking for work.
Insurance is 23 minimum. That's provided they have a flawless record. Okay. One speeding ticket before 25 is automatically no.
Okay.
So my hiring pool, like I said, is not the biggest. We love college kids. They have a lot of them to work to hire that way, but no. Sadly, the insurance is very strict on who we can bring in.
Gotcha. I think the idea of a surveillance camera, I mean, are you suggesting that be at the owner's expense?
Well, all my cars have cameras already.
Yeah.
So for me, any taxi in town should already provide that, you would imagine, for safety of not only customer of the car, but safety for the employees in the vehicle too.
Why would we require it?
It keeps us making sure we're better at our job too. If your main priority is safety for the public, having cameras in the car keep your drivers more honest. You keep people in the car more honest. Before I have cameras in place, I had customers would complain about the most silliest things. Your employee said this to me. And when I had cameras in the car, they say that, well, clearly you're lying. I had a camera in the car. Oh, I didn't know that. So a lot of that kind of thing really stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're concerned about safety, why would we lower the laws allowing individuals with drug offenses and theft offenses to
because you're letting us do my job as the owner of the business, who I think would actually be worthwhile to have. Again, I had employees who didn't fit the current ordinances, who were my most ideal employee. Always on time, customers loved them, not a single issue at all. So again, if it's a 5-year minimum on the charges, a small pot charge or a small offense that they paid their fine and they've already are trying to get the life back on track, I feel like it's worthwhile for me to give them a chance to let them see if they can do a good job. And it's not fair to keep telling them, no, you messed up. Oh, well. I get being safe. That's what we do that constantly. If you see how I'm always hiring, it's for those reasons. I have employees I've had who fit everything perfectly. They were some of the worst drivers I've ever had. They were bad. They were erratic drivers. They were attitude issues constantly. They were horrible. So it makes it harder to do our job.
I don't know, Tyler, if you may know the answer to this, and John, you may know just because of your business, but do we have similar kinds of restrictions or ordinances or anything for Uber and Lyft drivers?
Yeah, so if you're anyone in the city who transports individuals in a vehicle for hire is required to have a business license.
Okay.
They're required to abide by these standards.
By the same standards that we're at. Okay, thank you.
And what exposure do you see introducing lower standards to the city in particular?
Well, it concerns me that the city would issue a license to someone who could get be convicted of methamphetamine, walk out of the courtroom and start transporting our citizens around the city. And so in the state of Utah, we think of a felony drug charge as something quite high, but the state of Utah reduced those charges a few years ago. So any simple possession of any drug right now is a misdemeanor.
Right. I would see it more as not that heavy to me. I guess I'm more like pot charges. In Utah, pot seems like a very common offense that's not really too hurtful for most people to use it, clearly. Now, if I also do drug tests too, though. So if I'm drug testing and they're failing, I'm not going to hire them. If they pass their drug test, I've done my due diligence as possible to make sure they're really trying to change life around. I think it's only fair to give them a shot. Now, other drugs I feel a little worse, but when it comes to, say, pills, I see Cedar's bad with that lately, I've heard of. How do you check for that? People who are clean background, but you find out later on they're doing this kind of thing instead. That's why my job, when I find out, I immediately let them go. Anything I see them being a risk to the public, they're not here much longer than that. I give them 1 strike on anything major like that. 2 on complaints of your driver was too erratic, please don't send them again. Then they're gone. So I do my best to keep my drivers honest, good drivers. Ask around. That's, I guess, my best way of saying how I do things is listen to the clientele base, look at our ratings. We do our best to adhere to everything possible on safety for this town. So,
can I speak for one moment?
Hold on for a second. So there's the other thing to remember too, is that you do all of these great things to keep our city safe and keep your drivers. But if we change all these standards, it applies to if there was other companies that didn't do all the things.
So one
that
thing I
you do.
suggested actually also was you guys could only allow so many licenses in town to be out. So if there are only 2 companies in town, you have a lot less to worry about with other companies opening up their own thing too and having bad drivers. Then the city has a much closer eye on who's actually legal taxing in town. So if you see other cars in town, police can pull them over because they know for a fact they're not legally allowed to even be here. Was a suggestion I had given to them. Other cities do the whole medallion thing, kind of similar for us here.
How do we compare with other municipalities?
So I looked at just a couple. St. George So we require 5 years from your last offense. St. George requires 10 on theft charges. Provo was 7 years in some of theirs. Now, they do, those two cities that I looked at, they don't allow a permit to be issued for possession of drugs with intent to distribute. But there isn't anything with simple possession, whereas ours does have that simple possession language. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know there may be some other comments from people, but I would just say that, I think there's some safety in surveillance cameras. I mean, when I'm in taxi cabs in New York City, I appreciate the fact that there's a camera in there for me, because you don't know, and cameras don't lie; they tell the truth usually. And the other thing I would say is that maybe, I don't know what the answer is, but maybe we need to look at some way, because I think background checks are important.
I agree fully.
And I would support that, but maybe there has to be some step in that process, so you're not waiting 30 days or 6 weeks, because I know that they take a long time. I do know that. So those are at least two of my thoughts on that, and then we'll wait and see what other people have to say.
Do the rest of you have any other comments right now? All right, now I'll let you talk.
Good evening, Tom Jett. Just a couple quick notes. That I support the free enterprise system, and I think it's good. And many people have some minor records and so forth. And Tyler's exactly correct when he says that someone has a charge coming out of directly out of court. It's a misdemeanor, but I think we can remedy that by putting this down to anything below a B misdemeanor, or is that possession B or is that A?
Yeah, so the way the drug laws work is there's 4 schedules of drugs. So the more addictive, the more debilitating, the lower the schedule. So Schedule 3 and Schedule 4 drugs are Class B. That's going to be your marijuana, I can't remember if Adderall is, but just, over-the-counter pills. And then your more addictive drugs are in the lower schedules. So that could be another option if we wanted to decide.
Just to drop it, anything under a B or lesser. That's number one. Number two, the idea of limiting number of taxi cabs sent chills up my spine. They already did that experiment in New York and it didn't work. I'm not real crazy about cameras being forced on the driver. If the company wants to do that, and that's where the passenger feels comfortable, that's fine. The free market will handle that. And the fourth issue was, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Councilman Phillips hit it right on the head. We shouldn't be using the investigation of the background checks, and I'll check them for a couple weeks and see if they work out. I think they should be applied for within 1 day or 24 hours of employment. It shouldn't be used as a tool for screening, because quite often there's a cost involved, but that's just a cost that gets passed on to the consumer and to the business. But we shouldn't use that as a tool, saying, let's give it some time. And I think it should be applied for immediately, even though there could be a temporary given. The license, the background still has to be applied for. So there's adequate due diligence. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Brad Green. And I agree with Tom. I know it's rare.
This meeting's already off to
I think that the marketplace can handle almost all of that stuff. And the city ordinance on the books right now, which there isn't specifically an ordinance being proposed, there's kind of an idea being floated. But the ordinance on the books seems to be retarding the market's ability to manage these problems. We have an overly arbitrary law that says, 5 years, anything. And yet, I employ a lot of employees. I heard recently that we're the second largest private employer in the county. And when you don't allow somebody to get back to work and prove themselves, it fosters recidivism. It pushes people back to jail because they can't get on with their life. And so we're hurting ourselves by disallowing people from working. You made a mistake. The rest of your life is messed up forever because you can't get a job because you made a mistake. There has to be a way. There has to be a path to forgiveness. There has to be a path to repentance. Now, whether that's 1 year for the misdemeanors and 5 years for the felonies, I mean, again, that becomes an arbitrary number that we stick to it. I think the marketplace can handle that as well. As far as the cameras in cars, you know, while we're waiting for a background check, is it reasonable to say if you want a temporary driver, you have to have a camera in the car? Once the background check comes back, that is a requirement. I think that that's probably pragmatically reasonable. Again, I think it's something the marketplace can govern. There's not an ordinance right now that I'm speaking to directly, but I think if anything you can do to allow the marketplace to govern this, I think is probably a positive way forward because we all want safe communities. We all want safe cab rides. And he wants his cars protected and he doesn't want his liability insurance to go through the roof. So we're all working to the same ends and we should let the market do that. That's what it does. It does it inexpensively. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other comments, questions, direction from council? Direction aspect would be helpful.
Well, I stated earlier, I think if we're having difficulty getting drivers and we want to make sure that we can support the business, can we find a path where maybe some sort of a temporary thing can be done while that background check is being done? That would be one of my suggestions, to see if we can't find a way in which to allow the process to move forward pending for that to come through. But I think that's a very important part to have.
Yeah.
So that would be a suggestion. I would say, can we find a path to make sure that can happen still of those 5 requirements, that one, it can still move forward once they have met the other 4 pending final notification of this background check.
I know for us to keep maintaining the 4,000 to 5,000 people we do each month, and we're growing that much more each month, it's near impossible now. We're losing, well, we're having wait times 30 to 40 minutes for.
Do you pay hourly, pay by commission? How do you pay your drivers?
They are commission. So when we lose rides, they lose money too.
Up your commission and you'll get more drivers.
I pay the highest in town by about 20%, I heard. So.
Okay.
So those are my least suggestion I have.
Any of the rest of you? Suggestions, ideas, comments? What do you need to move forward?
Well, the ordinance is written.
Yeah.
So next week, any questions you have during this week, you can come in and talk with me and we can go through each one of the recommendations next week before you vote.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Thanks, Tyler.
action.
This will go on the action agenda for next week.
Well, thank you for your time.
sir.
You have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, item number 5, consider an ordinance accepting the annexation of property located at 1925 North, 3100 West.
Good evening again. Arlo Fossum with Go Civil Engineering. So we've had this kind of in the process for several months now. We've been through the county process. We talked with them. I guess it's been put up to the state, and it's been a while since I've had to deal with one of these. So
Yeah, so we went through in October and the proposed annexation was accepted. At that point in time, notice was sent out to all the taxing entities for them to oppose the annexation. That was advertised appropriately in the papers, and that protest period is concluded on January 1st. So we then advertised again and brought it before the council for the final ordinance. If that is approved, it'll be sent up, the plat will be signed, it'll be sent up to the governor's office to be officially recorded.
and the city grows by 5 acres.
Yeah, there's only one property owner, and Mr. Meisner's the proponent of this, so he's in agreement.
413.
Did water come with this at all?
I believe so.
I know he did have some water rights. He was given some surface and below ground water, or in discussion doing that.
On the documents I brought with me, I don't see that, but let me look into that and I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
In light of our conversation earlier, that might be a good thing because I remember us talking about that.
Right. And if no water was deeded over at the time of annexation, anytime development happens, it'll still be required to at that time. So either way, the city will get water for that land.
Okay.
Is there any other questions on?
Does that fall within, it's still within the radius of the fire department, the fire stations and whatnot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's right out by the airport.
That's what I figured, that it would be covered. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. It's right over by Equestrian Point and Sycamore Trails.
Okay.
Are there any additional comments, questions? No?
May I ask one question? Tom Jett. Paul spoke at the very beginning. We talked about water, and then we talked about annexation, and then we talked, it's all kind of leading together tonight. Then Terry asked if there was water brought in. So I don't own that property, but let's work on the assumption here for simplicity that I own that property. Am I going to have to bring water in that is of a certain age, or are we putting a value on water that is what 1970 water has a lesser value? So we're going to require 3 shares versus 1930 water, which maybe we require 1 share. Do you understand?
I'd rather require more 1930 water.
Well, but are we putting everybody has to have a comedian. So
that's what we want. We don't really want the 1930.
So that's what I guess that's what I'm asking. So I'm the developer, or I'm the person, the proponent asking for that annexation. Are we putting a certain onus on me to?
The simple answer to your question is no, we don't.
Okay.
Graduated scale depending on the age of the water.
Oh, all right.
That's a good point. The Conservancy District has entertained that as an option.
Okay.
With the priority is late, you bring that water plus some money or get an earlier right. Because in the end, it's going to cost more.
All right. Okay. I'm not trying to sour anything for you. This is for future, because we'll continue to annex in the future. Thank you.
And we haven't been accepting any water that's later than the 1934 date.
Okay, thank you.
But do we require them to bring money to pay for it
Yes,
then?
that's their other option.
Okay.
So every 2 years we have the water rights in the valley appraised. And I think we just went through that a month or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we base our assessment on, is that appraisal.
Okay.
Are there any additional questions, comments?
No.
No?
Just want to say that the water comes out of my tap is really good. I don't know if it's 70s water or 80s water, but it's good.
All right, this is going on the action agenda. Yeah. Okay, item number 6, consider vicinity plan for Cedar Ridge Phase 2 PUD. Is this, I don't know who's presenting this.
That would be me, Bob Platt, listed on. But anyway, this is phase 2 of Cedar Edge PUD up behind the Holiday Inn area. First phase consisted of 26 units, and the second phase consists of 52 additional to make a total of 78. This has been through City Engineering Office review, been through Planning Commission, and received a positive recommendation, and like to move forward.
Comments, questions?
I have no comments other than what was brought up last week at Planning Commission meeting, and you've said whatever that fall is on that hill will be addressed one way or the other for the other development. So
Absolutely.
No, I have no questions.
Yeah.
All right. Then are you good with this going on consent? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 7, consider amendments to Cedar City Ordinance 30A, pretreatment. It's so infrequent that you come and spend your evening with us.
But I'm here.
Yes.
Good evening, council.
But you still
So-
have to state your name.
My name is Peter Surrey. I'm
Thank
the pretreatment program coordinator for Cedar City, Phoenix City, and Iron County jurisdictional areas. In 2016, EPA in the state of Utah conducted a compliance audit on what's called program implementation. Agencies complete such audits on an annual basis. The audit incorporated an evaluation of the program's legal authority, Ordinance 30A. The last legal authority evaluation was completed in 2006. The program conducted a concise evaluation addressing only required amendments and additional corrections such as identified editorial and format changes. It's my belief that the amendments will better streamline industrial user interaction and overall comprehension of the program. Amendments will also allow the program to more effectively interact with public institutions. I'd like to note the changes that were made will not affect the general public and any existing commercial or industrial users. As per federal standards, this process is what's called a substantial program modification and includes a legal component, working very close with the EPA. So working very close with the EPA and the state. Our Ordinance 30A currently, as you see it, meets all the required regulatory revisions and has been verbally approved by the state. The ordinance is now being brought before you for approval. So I've met and relinquished all the information to Mr. Tyler Rummel, Cedar City attorney. Upon council approval, I will send the EPA and the state a packet containing the program cover letter, legal counsel letter, proof of council approval, and the revised and updated Ordinance 30A. At which point the state will public notice Ordinance 30A and allow for a 30-day comment period. Upon satisfactory completion of the public notice and 30-day comment period, the state will generate a letter to the city approving Ordinance 30A. At that time, all permitted industrial users will be informed of the ordinance changes. And to add to that, I meet with them very frequently, and they're all aware of the ordinance changes, as there has been changes in the permits to reflect the upcoming changes. Finally, the updated ordinance will be incorporated into the Cedar City, Iron County, and Enoch City websites for the public to access. Thank you.
So if I understand, this is primarily formatting and editorial changes, and it will not have any cost effectiveness on the businesses or the commercial users. Is that correct?
That is fair to say. Yeah, there are required changes. Those required changes speak to a regulatory component.
Sure.
So, for example, the trickle down from a federal regulation to the state sewer use ordinance to a local ordinance, there may be director of water quality versus it's saying something else. So there's just a tightening up, more specificity to the ordinance.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Tyler, you've reviewed all of this, and
I have. Yeah, Mr. Surrey and I met for a while, and I asked him every question I could know to ask about it.
that's kind of how I felt when I was reading it.
Pretty exciting reading, I'll tell you.
I'm sorry. But, it was 3 years ago, so a lot of back and forth. It's fun. But
at the end of the day, we're just coming into compliance with state law that's been updated by federal law.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I could have just said that.
That would have been way too simple.
Yeah.
Any other questions at all?
No.
No.
I think so. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
thank you.
All right, this will go on the action agenda. All right, item number 8, consider an ordinance amending Chapter 23, Article 9, regulating short-term rentals. Okay, with this item, I know that that's probably why the majority of you decided to join us this beautiful Wednesday evening. As such, the council has read and reviewed all of the planning commission minutes, plus all the emails and everything else. we are similar to Planning Commission, going to limit the overall comment period. So please, if you've spoken, unless there's some Pete left for this exciting part, unless there is some brand new thing, respect everyone else so that we can get through all the comments. We're going to limit comments on this to an hour, so we'll finish the comments at 7:30, if not before then. So keep that in mind. I'll kind of keep you updated as we get closer, or you can all probably look at your phones because that works too. So we will start with Tyler giving an overview and then kind of let council and then get into questions, comments.
So as the council will recall, in about April, May of last year, the city council voted on kind of the starting point for our short-term rental ordinance, which was approved and passed. We had a group of concerned citizens that made some proposals about restricting it in certain zones. That came before the council in August, September. That recommendation did not pass. However, the majority of the council gave us some instruction. Let's meet together, see if we can find some common ground. A kind of a community-based meeting was held where stakeholders on both sides of the issue came in and voiced their opinion. I took notes during that meeting and distributed those to the council. Based on your feedback, I did my best to craft an ordinance that I felt the council kind of wanted the direction to go. I then distributed that back to the citizens, and they came in and added some additional components they wanted to see. The ordinance with staff's additions and the citizens' additions was taken before the Planning Commission a couple weeks ago.
Last week.
Last week. Sorry, time flies. Yeah, it's as if it was a dream. And so, based on Planning Commission's positive recommendations, I put together one single ordinance. So in your packet, you'll have the first ordinance is the positive recommendations that came from Planning Commission. I then supplied you with the minutes as well as what the original ordinance looked like with the two different additions. So in the interest of time, I could go through, if the council would like, I can go through every addition. I also trust that you're familiar with this enough that you're quite aware of what those are. So any specific questions for me?
Not at this time, but that doesn't mean it won't happen.
I have one. The International Building Code is referred in there. What actually, do you have how it defines a bedroom, or what are the requirements there?
Yeah, I'll ask Mr. Drew Jackson to come up and answer that.
We're just getting to hear from all of the different people who normally.
You guys on the back row and.
Drew Jackson, City Building Department. The International Building Code and International Residential Code do not specifically define a bedroom. There are characteristics when the bedroom is on a set of plans that they have to follow, but there's no specific definition of.
All right. I was just trying to understand why that was requested to be put in there if it doesn't define what a bedroom is. I'm looking at it, one parking space per bedroom as defined by the International Building Code. So I didn't, maybe that's a question for the people that put it in later then. So, okay.
If maybe I'd just make one comment on section 5 that's titled License Procedure. So this was a section.
Is that under the combined amendment? We have several pieces of paper in front of us. So I want to make
It's
sure we're
under
looking.
the Planning Commission, the addition recommended by the Planning Commission.
So in your packet, it's
Thank you.
the first ordinance that's listed in there.
So if you look at number 5, which I think is 3 or 4 pages in, the very top it says license procedure. how that was originally written was the applicant would need to provide notice to everyone within 300 feet. And then if there was someone who opposed it, they'd write within 10 days, they would contact Mr. Jackson and say, hey, I want to contest this. And then it would go before the Board of Adjustments. The Planning Commission felt, hey, we're really just passing the buck here. And the Board of Adjustments is just going to say, do you meet items 1 through 5 to qualify? And they're going to have to legally, we're going to advise them they need to grant the application. So the Planning Commission felt, well, let's get rid of that. And so we left, how it got left was that if they want to contest it, they contact Mr. Jackson. So I would propose a couple changes to that. One is, instead of, if we're going to leave it how it's currently written, let's get rid of the word contest and say discuss, because there's really nothing to contest. If staff feels they meet the 10 requirements, whatever it is, we're going to sign off. And then with that, we would need to strike that last sentence that just says, if no contest is received within 10 days, then it's going to be signed off. Well, it's going to be signed off anyways, as long as they meet the ordinance.
Are there other sections you?
I think that's it.
Okay. Are there other questions? First off, from council. And if not yet, we will let the individuals that are here to speak on this. Oh, wow. Like sit, Tom, sit. Tom. I was just talking to Tom. The rest of you are fine. So, go ahead, make sure you state your name. And like I said at the beginning, try to keep your comments as succinct as possible so that we can get through everyone in the designated time frame.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tammy Vogt, and I'm actually representing the homeowners committee that got together to work with Tyler and the Planning Commission to put this together. So I'm going to speak on behalf of that group. And first, I'd like to address Terry Hartley's question about the definition of a bedroom. We actually got that out of a lot of other cities' ordinances. They have as defined by the International Building Code. And there isn't a definition for a bedroom, but there is a definition for a habitable room. And a habitable room has to be at least 70 square feet and have a 7-foot ceiling. And we put that in there to prevent people from being able to turn downstairs pantries and closets and stuff like that and call it a bedroom, put a bed in it. So that's where that comes from, and that's why that's in there. So it's the definition of a habitable room.
But the way the ordinance is proposed to be written, it says 1 parking space per bedroom. So that doesn't tie in anyway to a habitable room. If it doesn't define the bedroom by being a habitable room, like if we're going to include that in there, I think it needs to be rewritten.
So if we said like a habitable bedroom or something like that
Yeah,
to
I
clarify
don't know.
that. Yeah, I think that
Or
would
just,
be.
I don't know, or remove it. I don't know.
Tyler, your recommendation on that, because, you know, like I said, that's in a lot of other cities' definitions specifically so that we can't call a closet a bedroom. You know, it's not a habitable room.
So the city defines a lot of things based on bedroom without defining exactly what that is, right? Like parking, we don't specify, it's 1.3 parking spaces per bedroom. So in our other ordinance, we don't define exactly what that is. That's left up to Mr. Jackson and the various codes and various buildings that apply to those codes to determine what that is. And it's worked out fine for the city so far.
Yeah, and it's actually a pretty loose definition of a bedroom, if you ask me. In real estate, it has to have a closet and a window, you know, in addition. So, you know, we have tougher restrictions. Anyway, I want to start off first by thanking you and telling you how much we appreciate how much work the city staff has put into researching and drafting these amendments to the nightly rental business license ordinance. I think you're getting ahead of any potential problems and being really proactive in doing this now before we do have problems. since I'm representing the homeowners committee, it was started to participate in drafting revisions to the ordinance at the as a result of the request by the mayor to go and form a working group and put together what we were looking for. And so that's how our group was formed. I can say that the proposed ordinance as you have it right now is good. It balances the rights and the needs of all citizens. And we as a group, a big homeowners group, are supporting this ordinance as it is in front of you right now going forward. I'll be honest that there's members of our group that would still like to see a complete ban in R1. There are members in our group that think 10 maximum occupancy is way too many. But in general, in the spirit of compromise, we are putting our support by this ordinance as it was brought forward from the Planning Commission. Personally, I would still like to see owner occupancy or primary residence requirement in R1 zone, which is 183 days. But that's something that I think that if we have a maximum occupancy, it does a lot of the same things.
Tammy, can I ask you a question on that? Why would you think that's only valuable in R1 as opposed to all zones? I live in R3, and so I'm concerned about my neighborhood as well.
In R2 and R3, there's a lot more investment properties. People have already bought properties that they're not planning on living in, and investors actually seek out properties in R2 and R3 for that reason, because there's not an expectation that you're going to have the same kind of restrictions that you're going to have in R1. And so the definitions of the zoning already kind of lend themselves to that, because boarding and lodging houses are already allowed in R3. There's provisions for that already. And so I think having that restriction in R1 fits with the R1 definition.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The key element in the proposed ordinance, as our group sees it, is the limitations of 2 per bedroom plus 2 with a maximum occupancy of 10. And I want to explain the plus 2 because people are a little confused about this. The plus 2 allows for the flexibility of a bunk bed or a toddler bed to be in a larger bedroom in addition to another bed, or the use of a sofa bed in addition to the bedrooms. And so it's 2 per bedroom plus an additional 2 for the house, but still with a maximum of 10. So if you have a 2-bedroom, you're renting out, you have 1 bedroom that you're using the sofa bed, you're still under the 10 maximum, but you're not. You still have that flexibility for extra people. The 2 per bedroom is universal. Almost all of the codes from other cities are using the 2 per bedroom, and I think everybody kind of agrees that that's the expected occupancy. When we're looking at rental property management, it's the same sort of thing. You look at occupancy based on 2 per bedroom, so I don't think anybody's really against that number. I think the sticking point for most people is the maximum of 10, and so I want to give you a framework of what that's based on, where our group got that number, and why we feel strongly about that. In reviewing the other cities' ordinances, and not just here in Utah, but all across the country, we saw these same limitations repeated over and over again. 2 per bedroom, maximum of 10. In doing our own research, we found that the number 10 comes from the International Building Code that we and many other cities adopt as our local code. And there's 2 parts to that, the IRC, or the Residential Code, and the IBC, which is the General Building Code, which everything else falls under. And which code you use is determined by occupancy and use. How many people are they and what are they doing? In nightly rental activity, the General Building Code, Section 310 of the IBC says that if people are transient sleeping, and there's more than 10 of them, it's grouped into an occupancy classification that includes hotels and motels. So the proposed ordinance will allow for transient and 10 and under. So we're not moving into that classification of hotel, motel as far as building code's concerned. So granted, this is for new construction. Building codes just apply to new construction. But if you can't build it with that occupancy over 10, new construction with all the new requirements for safety and exits and egress, then why should we be allowed to use our older homes that were built to different standards and use them in ways that they weren't intended? And in fact, there's actually a whole body of language in our codes and our zoning that support or would indicate that a family home isn't a family home anymore if you start adding a lot more people or you just start doing different activities. And so, for example, from the same International Building Code 3.10, a lodging house is houses with 5 or fewer guest rooms can be built to residential standards. So 5 and fewer guest rooms. Okay, and the definition of a lodging house is a one-family dwelling where one or more occupants are primarily permanent in nature and rent is paid for guest rooms. So the International Residential Code goes even further and states that single-family and 2-family lodging houses with 5 and fewer guest rooms may be built to residential standards only if they have fire sprinklers. So I don't think most of the homes that we're talking about as nightly rentals have fire sprinklers, and the ones that have over 10. So notice that the code keeps mentioning this 5 and fewer guest rooms, and 5 and fewer guest rooms at 2 per room is 10. So we keep coming back to those same numbers. They reinforce each other. From our own zoning definitions, we have R1 that says no boarding houses, no lodging houses, no commercial activity. R2 says boarding and rooming houses are permitted if they have accommodations for not more than three boarders. So our own zoning definition right now restricts 3 boarders in R2. No restrictions in R3. What about the city's own definitions for single-family homes? No more than 4 unrelated persons. So there's a lot of information here that would indicate there should be limits on this, that homes are not intended for really large occupancies and they're not intended for transient activity. And we can quibble about the definition of boarding houses and lodging houses, rooming houses, hotels, with or without meals, but the sentiment and the intent of both our zoning and our building codes are clear. It really needs to stay under 5 guest rooms and it needs to stay under 10 occupants so that we're not looking at a hotel motel classification. So if we look at over that, once you go over that 10, well, then we're talking about commercial activity, like a commercial bed and breakfast. And commercial bed and breakfasts don't do anything differently than nightly rentals, except they serve breakfast. That's the main difference between how a commercial bed and breakfast operates and how a nightly rental operates. They're usually somebody that lives there on the premises and that rents out rooms, takes care of the place. So if breakfast is the main difference, it's kind of shocking that we would propose to allow that same activity in residential neighborhoods without all of the same safety restrictions that commercial bed and breakfasts have to adhere to. They have health inspections, they have fire suppression systems, they have wheelchair accessibility, they have egress requirements, and we're not requiring any of that in homes that are doing exactly the same thing except without breakfast. So just kind of keep that in mind. Commercial bed and breakfasts are not allowed in R1, they're not allowed in R2, and they're only allowed in R3 with a conditional use permit. So they're actually only allowed in commercial and multi-use. So again, it doesn't really make sense that we would have such a large operation allowed in a true residential neighborhood. So if we keep it under that maximum of 10, then I think that we're in line with what our zoning and our codes say. There's been a lot of discussion about this, and at the Planning Commission, one of the commissioners actually laid out a scenario and said, hey, is this excessive? You know, if I've got 12 to 15 members of my family and we've got 3 to 4 cars and we go on vacation, we stay in a residential neighborhood, that doesn't sound too excessive. And it doesn't. It doesn't sound like any big deal. The problem is that it's not just that one family and it's not just that one time. That happens over and over again, possibly every night during the busy season. And so it's the transient nature of the activity that is the problem. That many people moving through those homes every night, every 2 nights, whatever it is a lot of additional traffic in a neighborhood, and it can't help but change the fabric of the neighborhood. I wanted to look at some numbers just to better understand that.
I just want to remind you that there is a line of people behind you, and we only have about another 40 minutes for this.
Okay.
So just try to keep your comments so that everybody else can still be heard as well.
Okay. If we have the proposed maximum of 10 people staying one night in a home that averages only 50% occupancy, so I'm being conservative, only half of the year, that's 1,830 people per year coming through that one home. And if they stay more than one night, there's less unique people, but it doesn't change the number of additional people in the home per night. Now let's bump that up to 14 people instead. I've heard that number tossed around. Now we're at 2,562 people per year, again, based just on 50% occupancy, part-time, half of the year, just for that one home. Right now on Airbnb, there are 13 short-term rentals within a half mile of my house. 7 of them are whole home rentals. And if these 7 homes only use the proposed maximum of 10, that's it, that's all they use, then we're looking at 12,810 people per year in just my neighborhood. Again, 50% occupancy, half the time, okay? If we bump that number up to 14 as a maximum, then we're looking at 17,934 in just my neighborhood, just within a half a mile of my house, okay? These are huge numbers, and this doesn't take into account the other 6 in my neighborhood that are renting out 1 or 2 homes. These are just the whole house rentals. These numbers are huge. And here's the problem. We have proof that at least 2 of those 7 homes had buses deliver in excess of 20 people. And what's worse, there's 15 homes for sale right now in that same neighborhood, most over 4,000 square feet with 5 and 6 bedrooms. And these prices are bargain prices for out-of-state buyers. That's the biggest problem. We simply have to cap it at 10 people because there's already enough compromise in our neighborhoods by allowing a maximum of 10. These are huge numbers. If we look at the impact by zone, there's different considerations. In R1, there tend to be larger homes and larger lots. That means more bedrooms and more parking. So naturally, there stands to be a lot of abuse in the R1. But with R2 and R3, the situation is equally problematic because if you take a twin home, for example, in an R2 neighborhood, those are 2 separate homes that are attached in one building. If they're each allowed a maximum of 10, which is what we're proposing, that's 20 people in one structure. That's probably why the building code says that you can't build those unless they have sprinklers, but we're already doing it. In R3, same thing. You get a triplex or a quad, then you have 30 and 40 people in one structure. And that's just too many people in too close proximity. And visitors are going to continue to come to Cedar City no matter whether we have 10 people as a maximum or if we're cramming 30 people in a home. We have plenty of capacity and plenty of nice options for people to stay here. We fully support people renting out their extra space. If they have basements, if they have extra rooms, we support that 100%. We think people should be allowed to use that extra space to make money. We just want to cap it so that we're not changing the fabric of our neighborhoods and that those neighborhoods stay the nice neighborhoods that we built, that we bought in and built in and invested in. So we need to draw a limit at 10 maximum. And we would ask the city council to support and respect the amount of work that came in putting the ordinance as you have it now in place. There were hours spent at the planning commission, hours working with the city attorney, hours with our group. And we feel that we've gotten this far for a reason, that this resonates with people and that it's fair for everybody. So we respectfully ask for you to pass the ordinance as we have it written today. Thank you.
Tammy, I had one question. You had provided me a spreadsheet that had the different communities. I wanted to go back to a comment that you had made that said almost all of them had a 10 maximum. It's only about 50%.
Yeah, and that's not everything that's on the spreadsheet. We have dozens and dozens of cities that we have looked at.
But you can't say all of them if the ones that you provided me were only 50%.
Yeah, we leaned
so
heavily.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that that the other cities and communities have not put that maximum occupancy on it.
Yeah, some of the cities actually determine occupancy or limitations in other ways, like they make them owner occupied. And so
or
if it's-
square footage or
square
number of
footage,
bedrooms.
right.
Like, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, there's lots of criteria cities all over the country are using.
Yeah, there's really not a standard out there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and owner occupied is actually far stricter because you're not going to be able to fit 10 people in a house that you're already occupying. And so that's one of the strictest ones that we see in a lot of the cities as well. And so the occupancy of 10 is actually a big compromise because it does allow a lot of people in.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Brian Middleton. First, I want to say I'm very grateful for friends on both sides of this debate. I rely on my friends to help me. I've got some unique challenges that affect me, but I'm not going to go into that. But I will say that due to the nature of the debate, in the last little bit, I have been getting a little bit angsty. We'll use the word angsty, and I've thrown out some not so kind words at other folks, and I want to apologize for being aggressive and being angry. So there is that. I take ownership of myself, and that's important. Second, the paper that my friend Bob passed out to you is a overshot of Cedar Park, which is the townhome complex I live in. My wife and I have decided that we're selling our house, so we're no longer going to be in the Airbnb business because of other reasons unrelated to this. But if you'll flip it over on the other side, and I'm sorry that the outlines were not printed out properly, but you'll notice that I outlined the exterior of the Canyon View Middle School football stadium. If that 300-foot requirement happens, then that means that in order for somebody in a townhome complex to rent, they would have to notify either by certified mail or go and hand deliver over 150 letters, which that doesn't sound reasonable to me, and it doesn't impact everybody in the complex, nor the people 2 streets over. So just want you to consider that. I have a very brief letter, and because of time, and also my wife wanted me to be home, I'll stick to the letter then.
And then can I have a copy of that?
The letter?
Yes.
There are some edits to it, but I will hand it to you.
Just so it can go with our minutes so Renan doesn't have to type the whole thing.
Sounds good. Okay. So I'm concerned about the state of short-term or nightly rentals in Cedar City. I specifically am concerned about the interference of government. That the interference of government will destroy a technology that helps the citizens of this city advance their personal prosperity. Those who naysay about short-term rentals have a variety of reasons that all boil down to fear. Fear-based decision-making is almost always harmful to all. I urge the City Council to please keep government involvement limited in this situation. Things to consider are to enforce existing ordinances, have basic requirements for smoke and carbon monoxide detection, and perhaps expect a fire extinguisher in the kitchen and expect a limited number of people per room size, which I believe that the 2 per room plus 2 for the house may not always apply to certain folks in certain situations. So I feel like it's a little limiting. Those last things, by the way, the smoke detector, carbon monoxide, fire extinguisher, and limit of people per room size, most, but not all, short-term rental companies have that expectation for their hosts, and they verify through guests. And so there's actually a self-regulating component to that. So going back to the first point, if the code violation is happening in Cedar City, then the city or its representatives, for example, police officers or code enforcement, should have the power to respond and address code violations. Giving an example of an existing situation, for example, if a long-term rentals guests are noisy, disruptive, or doing something illegal, it makes sense that that person perpetrating those acts should be held accountable, not the owner of the property. The owner of the property is accountable for maintaining a safe property and to his or her best ability to attract tenants that would be respectful to their property. The same goes for short-term rentals. To hold an owner of the property accountable for the misconduct of a guest is the ultimate violation of the Constitution that we hold dear. It's guilty until proven innocent, essentially. Likewise, to hold the perpetrator, to not hold the perpetrator of that violation accountable is rewarding bad behavior, which as a behavior analyst in training, I will say that's a way that you encourage additional bad behavior in the future. Something I will add that we have not heard any reports about violations of Cedar City codes. The last time this issue was addressed in August, those in charge of code enforcement specifically stated that the home where all these concerns came about did not violate any of the existing city ordinances in the realm of parking, noise measures, or similar. I'm not addressing the limit of people per home that's a totally different matter. Although I will note that of the 175 Airbnb homes listed, only 10 of them allow for more than 10 guests. And of those 10, 3 are actually registered beds and breakfasts. So 7 out of 175 homes are affected by that limitation that's already being self-imposed. Regardless of the term reasonable regulations keeps being used as a term to justify unreasonable limitations on your neighbors that want to keep to get ahead and use their property to earn money to pay the bills. Reasonable is enforcing existing codes. Reasonable is making it so our police and code enforcement can enforce those codes. I feel like they're pretty limited right now, and I think that we should give them more power. Reasonable is holding any individual who violates a code or ordinance accountable for their actions and their actions only. Reasonable is leaving people alone who are being good neighbors, talking to their neighbors, problem solving things on an individual basis rather than using the blunt force of government to push others around. Reasonable is to stop wasting the time and money of government on something that can be solved with a conversation or using existing rules to address. As a soon-to-be former short-term rental individual and all the others that I've talked to, we regularly talk to our neighbors because it's important that we don't step on our neighbors' feet for many reasons. The reality is that short-term rentals improve the lives of individuals and families, for both those who are offering and using them, and they present an opportunity to continue improving the overall economic state of this city. To limit them or to bog them down because of what ifs and special interests of a limited group is short-sighted and narrow-minded. Please stand on the side of property rights and freedom.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is James Ayton. Thank you for letting me speak, and thanks to the council for taking this issue seriously. And thanks to all the members of the ad hoc committee that met to thrash out the details of this issue of short-term rentals. A lot of work has gone in over the past few months, and we've come a long way since this issue first surfaced last year. There's been a lot of give and take. It's become obvious last week when the Planning and Zoning Commission met and to discuss and vote on this issue. Although the commission did not vote positively on everything that our citizens group wanted, we are heartened by the result, especially that they voted on very sensible and reasonable compromise of two people plus 2 and 10 people maximum. This makes so much sense because, as Tammy pointed out, the number 10 appears so many places in the language of the IRC and IBC. And if you think about it, it's a good number for someone to say, yeah, over this number, it makes it look like a hotel, and that's not what we want. Having hotels in residential neighborhoods is not in the best interest of the city. Let's be proactive rather than reactive. When I listen to the good people who run short-term rentals talk, I don't hear them saying they want more than 10. I hear some of them saying they don't want to pay the license fee or $40, but that's the ordinance. Paying $40 won't put anyone out of business. And notifying your neighbor won't put anyone out of business. That's part of being a good neighbor. So let me end by saying that contrary to a lot of social media rumors, no one's trying to put short-term rentals out of business. We just want to keep hotels out of residential neighborhoods. So please reserve the 2 per bedroom, 10-person maximum limit, as well as the other items passed last week by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? If you are reading a statement that's somewhat prepared, can we have a copy of it just like I did with the other one? So I promise it will make Renan like everyone so much better so that she doesn't have to type every word. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Walser, and thank you for listening to me. So when my husband and I 4 years ago decided to buy a home, we found a home that we loved. It suited our needs. It was almost like it had been built for us. And then we were considering the other home, which is where we live now. We did some research on the neighborhood, and we noticed behind it, we were about to put in our offer on this great house. And we decided to do some research to find out what was going to happen to that parcel of land behind. And it was going to turn into rentals. And so we decided immediately that we did not want that. And we bought this other home instead. We paid $35,000 more for this other home that was lesser than the one that we wanted to begin with for the safety of our children. So I'm going to just draw to the attention something that I thought was obvious, for a mother, but I'm just going to say it out loud just so that it's said. When Tammy brought up all of those numbers, the amount of people that are coming into these areas, there's no background check of these people. And that is a lot of people. And if something were to happen to a child and they were afraid to say something right away, there would be no way to resolve it. There wouldn't be the accountability that there would need to be to keep children safe. And that is my concern. So I think that it is generous to have a 10-person maximum. I would really like it if I could count on having my neighborhood be what neighborhoods have been defined as in the past, which is families and neighbors that stick around for a while. Anyway, that is my concern. So I think that is quite generous to say 10-person maximum in the homes, just to keep the safety of the kids and to keep that integrity of what a neighborhood has been in the past. Thank you.
Hello, Randy Allen. This is kind of a reporting back thing, because if you'll remember, some people got really upset about some things that were happening and they proposed a ban. The council rejected that, but they said, hey, why don't you meet? Why don't you meet and work together? And these fine people did that. They have spent hours and hours and hours. And we came together, we compromised, and the staff has worked hard. And this ordinance that has been produced is not everything that we want. There's several items we wanted that we didn't get. But it has a few things we got, and some of the folks who wanted no restrictions didn't get what they want. That sounds like a good law to me, when everybody gets some of what they want, but not everything. We all bought into a zoning scheme when we moved to Cedar, and it's the same in most any city, you know. It's the homes over here and the commercial over here. We all live in the residential area, I assume, most of us. And so when a commercial use that's kind of skirts right in between some of the definitions that we've traditionally had, like lodging home, boarding homes, comes up, we've got to deal with it. And so I thank you for dealing with it. And I think that we've struck a balance. We're no longer asking for a ban. We've gone the rounds in our meetings and we've said, you know what, we've got to compromise. We've got to allow people to do short-term rentals. Short-term rentals can be great. They can help people earn some extra money, and people do it the right way, and it's great, But what we should focus on are the excesses and making sure people are notified, making sure there's a responsible person. Let's fix the problems. And so that's what we have decided to do. Terry, thank you for your question about the chart. If you look carefully at the Utah cities on the chart, Hurricane has a 10-person bedroom, a 10-person limit. Santa Clara has a partial ban. St. George has mostly a ban, except for one zone. Ivins is mostly a ban. Ogden is 2 per, plus you have to be a primary residency. Sandy is 8 max, plus primary residency. And that's the Utah cities on our chart. So while they don't all have the exact formulation in our thing, they're where we are proposing or stricter. So, you know, in 2.5 minutes, it's hard to, sometimes you gloss over things. So I think that $40 and notification and getting a license is reasonable. I think that this is not perfectly enforceable, but no law is. We have speed limits because it makes our roads safer, and the person who goes 70 in the 40 zone can be pulled over. Most people stick around the speed limit, and we rely on the goodwill of people to follow the law, yes. But just because it's not perfectly enforced is not a reason not to have a law. Other than that, I hope that you guys will respect the process. We've gone through here, planning commission, votes, we've lost, we've given, we've come together. It's been multiple months, and the 10-person limit makes sense in our code. And if we need a bedroom definition, I would assign Mr. Romerl to do that. I wrote a definition, and I'd be happy to give it to him. But well, he's a fine attorney, and I bet he could write one that's better. It's a good point. It really isn't defined, and we probably ought to define it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
My name is Eric Vogt. I want to thank the City Council for their careful consideration of the contentious issue of short-term rentals. Previously, I had addressed you regarding my views on how disruptive the large house on our street has become to our once tranquil neighborhood. The house essentially functions as a hotel. At the time, I was mostly reacting to the situation on our block, and yet soon realized that what was most important was clear, fair, and reasonable citywide policy that would benefit the city as a whole. Each of us needs to look beyond our own narrow interest to ask a question. How do we balance the disparate and often conflicting wishes of those of us wanting to preserve our safe, quiet neighborhoods, the interests of our traditional hospitality industry, people wanting to earn extra in short-term rentals, and people wanting to visit our beautiful area? After doing some research, I've come to realize that we are far from being the only community grappling with this issue. The controversy is nationwide, and there have been much more profound problems in other communities. I recognize that short-term rentals are popular and that some people count on the income of renting an extra bedroom or basement. I have no problem with this and have come to believe that there are benefits to the community at large. However, I also know that unlimited short-term rentals can be very disruptive and in ways that I didn't even consider. The good news is that licensees are relatively few, and the city is in a position to establish good policy before many of the worst ills of short-term rentals occur. What might these be? On the internet, unsupervised party houses seem to pop up with regularity in university towns, but this hasn't yet been a problem here. In towns that are vacation destinations, the very real threat is to the local affordable housing market. There is more money to be made in short-term rentals, especially if there are no limits, so more and more houses get converted, creating shortages in long-term rentals. Mid to low-income locals eventually get squeezed out of the housing market, or at least forced to accept more marginal housing. Another inevitable consequence of an unlimited short-term rental policy is that the traditional hospitality industry is hurt. The hotelier that I spoke to told me occupancy is down approximately 15% despite a booming national economy. It is extremely unfair that a hotel should have to conform to stringent safety, parking, staffing, and tax requirements, and a homeowner can currently cram 20 people into an unsafe basement under last year's ordinance allowing short-term rentals. This is a grave disservice to an industry that has spent millions in construction, employment, advertising, and taxes in support of our city. Lastly, unlimited short-term rentals can be very disruptive of the residential neighborhoods established by existing zoning and building codes for a tranquil place to raise our family and a safe place to invest our money. Most of us bought our homes with the implicit protections of existing zoning and building codes with reasonable expectations of what kind of activities would be allowed there. I know that you have had an earful on this topic, so important though it is, I'll reluctantly move on. Let me be clear. Most of my neighbors, myself, have no problem with someone renting out a spare bedroom or basement to visitors wanting to vacation here. Tourism is a vital part of our economy. We love our small, safe, and vibrant community and want to preserve the very qualities that make it desirable to live here or visit. Lack of limits on short-term rentals could see potentially thousands of people cycling through a large house in a year. This would have a major disruptive impact on our once quiet neighborhoods, as well as a negative impact on the value of our homes. If someone wants to run a hotel, terrific, but let them conform to the zoning and building requirements that the rest of the hospitality industry must meet, or at least restrict this level of commercial activity to the existing zones that were established expressly for those. At the Planning Commission meeting, much importance was placed on the short-term rental industry self-regulates through a ranking process between host and guest. This closed-loop mutual admiration pact is a very flawed argument for self-regulation. The internet is replete with instances where this system has broken down to the detriment of host, guest, or neighbors. Furthermore, I can think of many types of transactions in which the buyer and seller, if asked, would rate the other as very satisfactory, while the rest of us would be aghast and appalled. I recommend you go to Las Vegas if you care to see this in action. No one has polled the neighbors and posted on the internet how they would rate the activities in the large house in our neighborhood, but I can assure you it wouldn't be favorable. Lastly, no one has inquired of the city to ask them to rate the vast majority of short-term rentals that are operating without a license. To conclude, I appreciate the efforts on the part of the planning department, city attorney, and council to resolve this issue. Although I feel that the recommendation drafted by the planning council falls short on several points, I believe it's something that I can live with, and that it is a compromise that represents the best interests of the city. Specifically, the requirements on off-street parking and limits on occupancy to 2 + 2 per bedroom with a maximum of 10 in residential zones is, for the most part, consistent with the intent of zoning codes and consistent with the specific wording of our existing building code. This ordinance would do much to address the problems of impact while protecting the rights of those wanting short-term rentals. I encourage you to adopt the recommendation and put this matter to rest so I don't have to keep writing these speeches. Thank you very much.
Can I get that speech? Sure. Perfect, thank you. Okay, just so everyone knows, we have about 15 minutes left.
Oh, are you in line?
There's a line that goes out into the hall.
Oh, well, I didn't, you know what?
Yeah, the line goes out into
They
the
like
hall.
to be in the hall. I don't know why.
I wouldn't have told him he and I are pals. Sorry, Brad Green. It's the first time I didn't lead with that, Mayor.
And don't you worry, had you got much further, I would have.
It was close, you guys. She was about ready to go. So this is similar to the issue that I spoke to earlier. In my vantage point, from my vantage point, we want a safe community. We want nice things. We want predictability, reliability, sensibility. We want a community that doesn't have unreasonable noise, disturbances, disorderly conduct, illegal substance use, as referenced in the ordinance, as well as referenced in lots of other ordinances. Those things are already illegal. Those things are already enforceable. Those things should be enforced. We already have those tools. We should use them. We should use them immediately and aggressively. But let's talk about what's normal residential use. I mean, I grew up here. And so I know what normal residential use looks like in Cedar City, Utah. I know what it looks like in Albuquerque. I know what it looks like in Provo and Spanish Fork. I don't necessarily know what it looks like in Los Angeles or Las Vegas. I've been through there. I don't like it. In Cedar City, Utah, let me tell you, I'm a radical, so I do crazy things with my house. But let's talk about my parents' house. What are the things that my parents use their residential house for? We've had concerts, which was referenced in the ordinance. Lots of concerts. We've had bachelor parties. I know it's not very sexy. Bachelorette parties, sponsored events, company parties, auto repair, lots of auto repair, scout camp, quilting parties, and an unlimited number of other unordinary, maybe not residential uses. They live in a nice neighborhood. I don't know if you guys know where my parents live, up on Roundtree Drive by the old hospital. Well, let's talk about guests in the bedroom. When I grew up, the neighbors down the street had 11 kids. My parents had 5, and that's a lot in today's world, but 11 kids. Think about how many bedrooms and how many parking spots. And I know the 5 kids in my family, my parents had a garage and a driveway, which we weren't allowed to park in. And there was always 3 of us driving, and so we parked in the street because it's a street and parking's allowed in residential neighborhoods. That's what the street, so the curb of the street is for, parking. Go look at the gutter in front of my parents' house. You'll find 3 distinct oil spots from teenage cars. The one in the middle, that's the biggest, that was mine. That's residential neighborhoods. That's common, parking in the street, a little bit. Not double parked, not halfway parked on the sidewalk, although when we were mechanicing our cars, that happened. Lots of parking. You know, I know local community members that are able to fix up their house nice because they have an extra income. On weekends, somebody comes to town for Shakespeare, for the parks, and they stay at their house. Nobody notices. It could be their brother-in-law. That's how they make their house nice. It's interesting, on the street, 100 West, where Southwest Plumbing Supply started, my company, at the top of the street, there's a bunch of old houses. And they were never all that appealing. And then a local hotelier who realized that the short-term rental market was just competitors and he shouldn't necessarily fight it, maybe jump in and get involved himself. He bought a bunch of them and fixed them up, and they're the nicest houses on the street. You guys know where I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. They're nice houses. That helped my street. That helped my property values. Guess what? They look nicer and are less trafficked now than they were when they were long-term rentals. I think it's advantageous to our community. I realize it's not an R1. To apply for a license, you have to notify everybody within 300 feet, which is very burdensome. And it's meaningless because they can't complain about it. We talked about that. As long as they meet the guidelines, the city has to approve it. So what's the point of notice? Cost somebody a whole bunch of money? I mean, putting a notice in the paper seems a little bit more appropriate, a little bit less burdensome. Also seems very common. It's interesting. Barry Short a few weeks ago brought up a state law, and I don't like to take people's word for things, so I read it. It seems very clearly that we'd be asking for a fee and a license for home-based business. I brought a copy of that part of the ordinance for you guys to read. I'm not a lawyer, but I asked 2 lawyers what they thought, and I got 4 opinions. I do know that there are people anxious to sue the city over this ordinance. And I don't want my money wasted because I spend too much on taxes as it is. They talk about this ordinance. People talk about this ordinance pragmatically, saying that the residential community that they bought was exactly how they wanted it. They don't want it to change. They wanted the predictability. They bought into an idea. Let me tell you something. When I grew up here, the small town experience was neighbors working together, understanding that your neighbors have different things, different ideas, opinions. We worked it out together between us. We didn't go to the city. We didn't go to the cops. Sometimes we went to the CCNRs, like Mr. Adams talked about in a recent podcast. We went to the ordinances of our community, our little neighborhood, and we worked that out and said, hey, look, we all agree that we don't want this in our neighborhood. And that was reasonable. It seems like we've forgotten, or we've lost our belief in freedom. We think that unless we can make a rule, people won't follow it. They won't do what's right unless it's the law. I think that's shameful. The Cedar City that I grew up in 30 years ago was a community where people wanted to do good because that was what you're supposed to do. And when I came back, that was what I was hoping for. And what I found was that as our government has grown, only the wealthy and Californian retirees can afford the housing prices. The community I love continues to become more overpriced, overburdened, like a California in the mountains. I think these busybody ordinances are destroying our community by legislative fiat, and I urge you to resist. You are our guardians. Protect us. This is not a sensible ordinance. More than 10 people live in houses. We don't have a car for everybody that has a bedroom. Sometimes people park in the streets. They should not be able to burden the community, and there's ordinances for that, and we should enforce them. Thank you.
Can I have your written papers?
You know, it's an outline.
That's all right.
I'll get you a more official one if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. We have about 10 minutes left, so.
Stare at my clock and be fast. All right. I'm Courtney Braithwaite. Sorry, I don't have anything written down. I'm winging it. I didn't speak at the Planning Commission. I wish I would have. But I hear kickback about the limit, and that's my big concern.
Feeling left out.
Is having a limit. I just wanted to share some of my experiences.
We're listening, I promise.
Okay. No, you're fine. I know, a lot going on. So I love Airbnb. In October, I went to Portland, family of 6. It was great. I could not find anything with more than 3 bedrooms. And it was 6 adult women going on vacation. We were not going to share a bed. So guess what? We got 2 Airbnbs and we had a great vacation. It was great. And we weren't all under one roof. In February, going on vacation, I got an Airbnb. Actually, it's this summer, it's 2019. There's 17 in my family going on vacation, and we are not staying under one roof. And it's going to be a great vacation. My point is that I know there's more than 10 people in families and 12 or whatever your limit is, but we're talking about transient people in and out. It's okay if you're not under one roof. I don't know why that's a big deal. Well, I have 13. Yeah, but that's like 3 families or 2 families. My vacation in the summer, there's 4 families. Some got hotels, some got Airbnbs. We're all going to be together. We'll probably hang out at one Airbnb at night, have dinner. But when we go rest our heads, we will not be under the same roof. And it's going to be okay. So I think a limit is reasonable. It's not going to stop people from coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Norm Forbush. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to serve on this committee. Tyler, thank you for all your time. A lot of time and effort have gone into this. We met with the planning committee last week. There was a lot of compromise. No one group got everything, but we got some. That's a plus. That's moving on in a positive manner. One of the things that didn't go through that maybe you might want to visit amongst yourselves between now and next week was owner occupancy, 183 days. A comment was brought up, and justifiably so, that we have some people that are working currently but live out of state, but have purchased a home, and this is going to be their primary resident when they retire. Councilman Isom came up with a good point, I thought. Allow them to claim that residence as their primary residence. That makes sense. It's going to be, these are bigger homes. If it was my home, I'd want to have somebody there to take care of it. A representative, so if there's any problems, whether they live in it or live next door, whatever. But I think that we should look at that occupancy again and give it some more thought. The one thing that didn't come out was there was a frustration about licenses and inspections. We have the health department that regulates our restaurants to make sure that they're clean and safe so that we don't get sick. We have the building board that makes sure, or the building department that makes sure that the electrical is appropriate and meets codes. The plumbing meets codes. We have the fire department that makes sure that the fire code is developed and maintained and should be maintained in these facilities. Why can't we have an inspection periodically, random, with 48 hours notice to make sure that they're complying? We have all these other restrictions that make sense. And I think an opportunity to randomly inspect is something that we need to look at. The two per bedroom plus 2 is outstanding. Our community is not the only one. We didn't invent this. All of the things that our committee got together and supported have basis in our city ordinances already. Thank you for all of the red that we got to see last week. Take another look at the green. And again, thank you for being serious enough to allow us to make these recommendations and suggestions. We feel that we have taken the high road. We have put ourselves in the place of the proprietors. Could we live with the things that we suggested and recommended? Yes, we could. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Richard Genk, and I know that I think, already over time. I'll be really brief.
Giving you, we have a couple more minutes.
I appreciate that. All right. So I don't know, there's a lot of things. There's been a lot of good things said this meeting. And some of what I'm going to say is not directly in response to what someone just said. I was already planning on saying this, I was setting up a scenario where you have 2 different families coming, or 2 large families, and so they have to rent separate B&Bs. This isn't an attack or anything like that. I was planning on saying that already. So the problem with that situation is, the two families come to visit Cedar City together. They're going to hang out at 1, and that's when the noise is going to be there. So does that, so let's say you have 14 people and they're all staying there and they start getting noisy. Sorry, my concern is, what does enforcement look like? How do you enforce that? Because if you have the 14 people are staying there, or however many, please show up because there's a noise complaint, and we already have noise complaints on the books. I don't think this 10-person limit is going to be affected by that. That wouldn't already be affected by the noise complaints that we already have on the books. So the police show up because they're being too noisy, they're being rude, and so they say, all right, how many people are staying here? Because only 10 people can stay, or however many people that building says. And so 5 people raise their hands, and the rest are visiting, right? They're just visiting. I mean, there's no, unless we're willing to put hidden cameras in these rooms, there's no way that we can act I help manage a B&B. I don't own a B&B, but I don't go in and, I don't barge in on their business. Just like in a hotel, I wouldn't, barge in, how many people are staying here? That's a little absurd. So there's no way for us to be able to enforce this reliably unless, the police are getting called on someone all the time and they just happen to catch them and they happen to be able, there's no way to reliably enforce that without us turning into, a fascist state. Which I don't think that we're going to do that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we can't do it without becoming that. Let's see.
Okay, we have 4 minutes total left. So
I guess the other, two other things. One is that, I keep hearing other cities this, other cities that. Does that mean that it's good for Cedar City? I mean, if we're just going to rely on other cities, why don't we just annex ourselves into Hurricane or something like that? Let's decide what's best for Cedar City, not what's best for other cities, because it may not be working well in other cities. It may not be working well in Hurricane or St. George. I like to think that we can run things better in Cedar City. That's why I live here and I love living here. And the last thing is, I would very much like if, instead of treating all Airbnbs the same, if we can say, okay, if you have more than 10, then let's talk about what kind of regulations there are. If you only have a couple bedrooms and you're only able to fit a couple of people in there anyway, then it's very unlikely that you're going to have any of these kinds of complaints. So those are my concerns. I appreciate you listening to me, and have a good day.
All right, we have 3 minutes left.
I need 30 seconds. I'm Robert Ennis. I have questions, not answers. Is there still the bit in the proposed legislation as it is currently instantiated wherein the owner is still fully responsible for the actions of the tenants? Is that still in there?
So there's language that says that they're taking on the responsibility to make sure their clientele treat the neighborhood like it should be. They're not having concerts, they're keeping the noise at a minimum. That could affect their license.
Okay, it'll affect their license, but I just wanted to understand to what degree their liability or the owner's liability includes the actions of their tenants. Whenever we pass a law, we want to consider like, what is the worst case scenario to which a crazy lawyer could twist this and just really ruin somebody's day?
Not all lawyers are crazy.
I'm not talking about those ones. I'm talking about the crazy ones.
There's only one in this room that's crazy, and I'll let you figure out which one that is.
Well, I look at them in the mirror every day. So anyway, that's it. I just have questions about that. That looks dirty to me. So I don't think it's a good direction to go in. Like, like if they're recidivists, like if it's like, yeah, every night's a party night, we don't need that. Okay.
So there's language in there that says that if we have substantiated complaints where they're actually cited and found guilty, within 12 months, their license could be revoked.
Okay, because it's
suspended or denied.
Okay, because it's been a while since I reviewed it, and I just want to make sure. Okay, nothing too onerous. Okay.
Okay. 2 more minutes.
I'm just
will you state your
representing
name?
Dean Vernon,
Thank
live
you.
up on Ridge Road, been a resident of Cedar City for 23 years. Of course, I'm like everybody else that's here. When we built our home 23 years ago, we never knew there was such a thing as an VRBO.
There wasn't 23 years ago.
So there wasn't. But we approve of and support this ordinance. We think it's essential. Times have changed. People need to have the opportunity to rent out in a reasonable way. I just want to have the record be able to reflect my neighbors who have come here tonight in terms of whether they support or oppose this proposed ordinance. So I want the record to reflect that I and my wife are in support of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Thank you so much for everyone that came and commented and the time and effort you have put into this. Does the council have any comments?
Well, of course.
Always.
I've probably emailed a lot of you because you've been emailing us a lot. I want to make sure and everyone understands that a lot of people have put a lot of time and effort into this, and I appreciate all that you have done. Please know that the council's been doing due diligence as well. We've been looking at issues all over the country, just like you have. And our interest is making sure we're doing what's best for the entire community. I think community does matter. I think there is uniqueness about our community, and I think that's why we've all chosen to live here for whatever reason. Times do change. The whole notion of vacation rentals and Airbnbs and that whole thing, it is not going away. It's how do we deal with that? And I think that's what everyone's been trying to talk about over the last 6 or 7 or 8 months now. I worry, and I've mentioned this to some of my colleagues and some of you, I believe, that short-term rentals can have a similar effect that I think sort of happened around the university years ago when we had long-term rentals. Beautiful neighborhoods, the older neighborhoods around the university. As so-and-so would move away or someone passed away, then that home became available for purchase, and somebody would purchase it as an investment, and then they would rent it out to 6 or 5 or 4 college students, and pretty soon another home on that street became available, and so all of a sudden there were 4 rentals on that street and only 4 neighbors. I'm concerned that we don't want that proliferation to happen with short-term rentals in neighborhoods, whether it's an R1, R2, or R3. So I want to make sure we safeguard the number that we have. Now, I'm not going to say we're going to impose a number, but I question whether we should have 4 in a row or 5 in a row or 6 in a neighborhood. And so I'm concerned about that as well. I do favor the fact that there's limitations on the number of people that can be in it. And I know there's been references because I've emailed some of you. I put out the number 12 to 14. So I'm just going to say it right out there. When I traveled with my family, and this was just siblings and parents, There was 10 of us. That wasn't a sister-in-law or a brother-in-law or anybody else. So when we went somewhere, there was 10 of us. So we're right there at the max already. But perhaps that is the best number. I don't know. You've been very compelling in your argument, and I really listened hard, and it's a conflict for me. It really is a conflict because I believe in neighborhoods and I believe in protecting our neighborhoods. I have some specific questions about certain line items in this that I don't know if we want to address now or whether you'd like to have that discussion next week. I don't know what's best, and maybe we can rattle through them mine quickly, and I don't know if other people have other comments, so I don't want to dominate.
Let's see what the other council members have to say, and then we'll continue. So, do any of the others of you have any comments, questions?
No.
Okay, then we can go back to whatever your things are.
Go ahead.
Well, mine's kind of line by line with some questions, so you might want to bring up the amended, because that's what I took it off of, the amended Planning Commission thing. And hang on just a second, folks. Sorry, I know we've been here a long time.
And with that, you're not like ready? I would have expected.
I've been listening. I've got in my notes here.
I'm just kidding. I'm just giving you
Okay.
a hard time. Calm down.
And some of these are questions. They're not even necessarily sort of something to think about. Under 4D, we require that one parking space per bedroom. Now, whether that's 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom. But in the R3M, if it's 3 bedrooms or more, it has to be 1.3 parking spaces. So, I don't know what that means. I'm curious why we have to spell out in this ordinance that a parking space has to be 9 feet by 18 feet. As far as I know, in looking at our parking ordinances for everything else, we say 1.3 parking spaces or 2.5 parking, whatever it is. We don't say a parking space is 9 feet by 18 feet. Now, I don't have a problem with it. I just wonder why we felt it necessary to put the actual spacing in there. I'm sorry?
That was limiting like a bus.
Maybe it was. Yeah, maybe it was. Yeah, maybe. I'm concerned in item I7. And I bring this up because I know this has happened. We talk about that it cannot extend beyond the existing dwelling. We can't have things in garages but we don't spell out too many instances. And I know people that have rented out their sheep wagons and trailers for short-term rentals. And I think that should be specified in there.
So the language is general. So
I know.
You don't get into this.
I know.
argument of, well, you didn't say you said I couldn't do tents, but you never said I couldn't do camp trailers, right?
Right.
So I wrote that language to include that. I mean, that was the intent. We don't want them in the garage. We don't want them in the.
And maybe it is. I'm not the lawyer here. I know people have used trailers as short-term rentals for a bedroom. I'm interested to know why in item 10, we asked the city building official to come and verify the off-street parking. And I think this is a matter of trust, and maybe this comes back to your point. Brad's not still here. We've, at least the last week in Planning Commission, they didn't want people to go into the homes to check how many bedrooms. The diagram was going to suffice. So we have to assume and we have to believe that the diagram presented with the application is correct for the number of bedrooms. Do we not believe then that the information, I'm looking at you, Mr. Jackson, that the information they give us on off-street parking is correct, that we need to go verify it? I have no problem with it, but I'm just wondering why we're asking for verification on parking, but we're not asking for verification on anything else. So see, mine are more questions than anything.
Yeah, and the angle with that is it's very simple for staff to drive by a house, see a 2-car garage, and 2 cars that can fit on the driveway. It's it's not intrusive at all on the homeowner.
Right.
And so that was at least something we can certify without having to go into someone's home or request.
And then
can I ask a question associated with that? with your current workload of inspections and all of that, is that going to be I guess we don't have that many, but is that something that you feel like you can do? You can nod your head.
Are you talking about the parking there?
Yeah. Then if you're talking, you have to come to the microphone. You stood up, you started talking, you have to come to the microphone.
Sorry, Mr. Jackson.
We're extremely busy. So,
But you have to say your name too.
Drew Jackson,
Thanks.
City Building Department. We're extremely busy. We'll do what we can, but we're already at our limit.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Drew, how many, or just a question real quick, sorry. to interrupt
No,
you,
you're
but
fine.
You're fine. How many complaints have we, other than this complaint that kind of brought this to the surface, how many complaints have we had?
I've been here 13 years. I've had two complaints.
Thank you. Then my last sort of question, and this is maybe the egg before the chicken or the chicken before the egg, I'm not sure, but assuming that the ordinance is passed in one form or another at next week's meeting, how do we go about, we as a city, getting all of these various short-term rentals to the required licensing process?
So the city has joined forces with the county and Bryan Head on some software where we can scrub the internet and look to see who's advertising. I think the thought was at one time to get an intern to help us put that list together and send out letters letting them know they need to come in and get a license. When they fill out that license, the requirements in the ordinance are spelled out on that license that they
Right.
would fill out, and that would educate them and let them know what they need to do or what they can't do.
Because I think it's really important for everyone who's gone through this much work and this much effort, wherever it ends up being, that we have to make sure then that they comply with what the city has requested them to do. So that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
I had a question that kind of goes along with Scott's question. The county had discussed this week in planning in their meeting. And our number E says they have to provide their state tax ID number. But I noticed that the county had written in there that there was another license that was a lodging license. Is there a separate license that would maybe?
It's the same tax ID number with an extension on it.
Okay, do we need to add something to that to specify? Because I wondered if that's where they would get looped into paying their transient room tax and whatnot, if they have that extension on it. This question.
I just wanted to say one last thing is that the city's taking some grubbing on social media primarily, that we are trying to be money grabbers and steal people's money. And listen, this is a $40 licensing fee. And then if you decide and go the certification, yes, there's a cost there. But they're in the business and they're making money from their clientele, which is appropriate. I have no problem with that. But they need to play fair. They need to pay the same level of transit room tax and user taxes that the hotels and the bed and breakfast pay. And the city is not going to be making money off of this issue, I can assure you.
All right. Are there any other comments, questions, anything from staff? Anything different, or from the council? Anything different the council would like from staff between now and next week? No?
I had one comment for right now anyway, as far as I had made a note. I thought that the non-residential use language was maybe a little bit too broad. And I don't know what to suggest, but maybe look at that, because
Where is that, Terry? Do you know where it is?
no, I don't have the section. Just when I was reading it in my notes, that I have to kind of agree with, with Brad Green's comments on things that my family has done when we've traveled and we're in a VRBO, or there might be a wedding, or all different kinds of things that Brad had mentioned in a home, that I don't want us to get so specific that then we're going to have the neighbors out there with their clipboard saying, okay, it says right in there, you can't.
So the language concerning like bachelor and bachelorette
Uh-huh.
parties, concerts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that if we need to maybe look at something that's not so broad.
I think our group was mostly concerned.
If you're talking, you need to come to the microphone, but this will be the kind of the only other
Just a quick
comment.
Our group was mostly concerned about commercial
Yeah,
activities.
and that's why I don't know where that middle ground is, because,
Exact-
you
well-
know, to limit it, but to just say non-residential use, that kind of encompasses too much. So I don't even know what to suggest, but
It's the
So-
commercial aspects of these activities that really concern us. We're happy for people to have
right. And that's
know,
why I don't think
weddings or
that,
whatever. It's
yeah,
just
I
the
don't think
commercial
that
aspects.
comment, that piece of it reflects what the spirit of
The
that
intent
was.
is.
Uh-huh.
Every one of those I have done at my parents' house
Yeah, exactly.
growing up. So
Can I say one tiny thing or no? Just super quick, 30 seconds.
you've never, in all of the years I have known you, you have never.
Randy Allen, it's not that we can't do this at our own houses. We're talking about renting it for commercial, doing this night after night after night. That's the difference. It's like, yeah, we've all done this at our houses and we can. It's the commercial transient activity.
But
So you
there's
said
still some of
seconds.
those activities that are not intrusive in a neighborhood, though, and I think that language is too broad.
So between now and next week, do you want Tyler to look at that? Okay.
So when it comes, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Would you like me to strike the bedroom as defined by the International Building Code?
I think we need something in there to define a bedroom. I don't know if that's what we use, but something, because I have concerns like Tammy that you don't want a pantry or a closet being used, because I think I spoke to a couple of councilmen about this, that eventually we need a definition of what a bedroom is, but not just for short-term rentals, for a lot of things in this community.
I emailed him one that I wrote.
There you go.
Well, we did include that they had to provide a drawing of the house, you know, when they came in. If they've got things drawn in there as far as pantries and whatnot as marked as bedrooms, that's probably not going to make it through the application process. And we don't define a bedroom anywhere else. I would rather have that stricken out, but I don't know what my other.
If the purpose of defining a bedroom was to say if you're going to divide the family room and put bunk beds in there, you have to have more parking. If we put a cap on how many people you can have in there, how much more parking is reasonably necessary? 2 cars can get 10 people. Well, not my car, but 2 normal cars can get 10 people. Do we need to so tightly define bedroom when we've already put another portion in the ordinance that says you can't have more than 10 people? If you can't have more than 10 people, if there's one in
We
each for
haven't
the 4
approved that
bedrooms
yet,
and a couple
though,
on the
so.
couch, is it necessary to define bedroom at this point?
And in reality, when you book these, they have pictures and ratings and reviews and all of that. And so if it's a crappy place, that's going to start to self-filter out.
Yeah, I know when I search for a rental and I have 14 people that travel with my family, and it says 3 bedrooms and it can hold 20 people, but I look at the detail and, you know, that's not a place I'm going to rent. I'm all for the business, like regulating itself instead of government regulating occupancy. I think the industry itself regulates that for the most part.
So back to the original question, do you want bedroom by the code, that part taken out. Or you can think about it. And
Well, I would like that by the code taken out, but I can't speak for the other four.
Well, I think we mentioned, and Drew brought it up, I mean, the code, building code requires certain things for a bedroom.
Yeah.
You know, square footage, ingress, egress windows, you know, closet. I mean, it's defined in the building code when you go to inspect a house.
Well, they aren't going to be
So
inspecting
I know they're
these,
not,
though,
but
so.
I'm saying that's why our other ordinances, I think it just says bedroom, and I think
Okay.
for this is not a good word to use, but we assume that it's a bedroom based on that. But we've seen that stretched also already in our townhome problems. So having studies with no windows called a bedroom. So yeah. But I don't know if that's vague. I mean, my whole intent on this whole thing, that's why I haven't said a whole lot, because I like what you've come up with. But my whole intent was to start with an application. I'll just give you my condensed version quick. It was to start with an application that had some information on it. And Randy hit the nail on the head for me when he said, honest people will read the application. You know, they will go by and say, hey, I can't do this. You know, I shouldn't do this in this neighborhood or whatever. And it'll police itself. Now, if you have a problem, we have ordinances in place. For example, we've had a problem house up in the area I live in. We shut it down with the HOA by calling the police because it was one of those party houses. They were renting it as a nightly rental. Well, that didn't last very long. That one night was it, because we called the police out and had it enforced for noise. And that was that. The guy's selling the house now. He's had all he wants to do with the HOA. So, but anyway, I'll just leave my comments at that because I like the other things we've put in there somewhat. So
Okay.
I think we have something to work with, and I'm glad that we went to this route.
Perfect. So at this point, it doesn't seem like there's other comments. We're good with this going on the, well, you don't have a choice. It's going on the action agenda.
Yeah.
And then for some of the different things that you have brought up, Tyler can have some different options for next week.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now we're moving on to the staff part. Seriously, thank you all
Thank you all
so
very much.
much
Thank you.
for your participation, for the civil manner this was handled tonight. And this is how issues should be solved. So thank you very much. Okay. Staff item number 9, review bids for the fleet building project.
Oh, Jonathan, you've been very patient.
Thank you. I'll be brief. We received, Kit, do you have the, anyway, we received 2 bids for the project. The bids came in quite a bit over budget. Staff recommendation is to reject the bids and work on securing more funding for the project. In the meantime, the street department can start doing some of the site work around the building. So we're not, completely, we'd like to keep the project moving forward in some ways. So, and then hopefully maybe later this year, we could rebid the project after we've secured more funding. These are the bids that we received. Carter Enterprises was the low bidder.
And budget is under $1 million, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's quite a bit over budget, and
only 600.
There are
55.
What I did on the budget, I kind of included everything that we've talked about for the project. There's certain things that don't necessarily need to be done to make it a functioning project, but I've included everything that's been discussed up to this point.
Were the ad alternates the expenses listed below? Is that the ad alternates, or was that something that you didn't see?
The ad alternates were, maybe go back down. Some of the ad alternates were the overhead crane.
Okay, so some of the expenses that you listed below.
Yeah, the floor coating, the site work. Those were the ad alternates. but I've included those in the budget. So
Is this going to be built right there with the Public Works building? Is that where we're building it, or what property are we
it's on
looking
that
at?
property, and in
Okay.
the back there's a building that was constructed about 8 years ago. Part of the building's already improved, and that's where they keep the CATS buses. And then the other part is just a shell. And so this project would be to finish out that shell.
You know, the building where Tom used to make breakfast for
Wait,
the,
we did
That's where I was
breakfast? Yeah,
thinking.
that's
the building.
this building.
so the
Yeah.
breakfast was in the cat's part that's done. This project
Okay.
is to finish off the fleet
The north
side.
Yeah, the north side of the building.
Would that still be used to park and I talked to Kid about this a little bit, but mainly to park CATS buses in as well? Or is it more for the Public Works to move into the work and
So-
use?
Cats would still use part of the building
Yeah.
to house their vans and buses and offices. I think the space split gets moved a little bit more in favor of the city's shop, and they were going to have a storage facility in there for parts and a couple offices, some restrooms.
Before I forget, our company bid this job with both Zwick and Card.
The grant part of that relates back to the CAT side. I think, isn't that right, Ryan?
Cats was going to do a split so that they could contribute. We're still going to use the shop side to do stuff on the Cats vehicles. So Cats was going to contribute some money towards the project.
Ryan Marshall, Public Works. The building was actually built with ARA grant funds through FTA. And so it was 100% paid for by them. And so with that agreement, the portion that the CATS uses right now for their storage, that was fully paid for by them, and the shell was paid. If we were to finish it off, we had to do a percentage split of how much would be worked on CATS buses versus the rest of the city. And that's how the split came up to identify how much of the federal funds that they would help participate in this second portion of it.
Does that answer your question better? Okay.
But since we're about $900,000 away from, at least with the ad alternates and everything, what is the prognosis to secure more funding? Because obviously something has to be done that way.
Well, we've talked a little bit with UDOT. There is an opportunity to secure a little bit more funding through the FTA. And so Ryan's going to pursue that. And then we'd like to just go in through the normal budget process and try to budget for the extra money. So that would happen. I don't know, when does the budget process start? Usually in March. So
February.
Oh, that
You can wait till March.
Okay, I'll wait.
Everybody else is coming in February.
Yeah, well, the mayor may or may not present additional funding as well. So, yeah, this facility predates me. It was done during harder economic times with grants, structures up. For years, staff has said, let's figure out how to get this done. With our existing shop, so primarily this is funded, as far as completing the building, is funded by solid waste with our big garbage trucks. So the idea was with these taller ceilings, you'd have an overhead crane. Mechanics would be able to work better on those vehicles, and that's kind of how we structured the funding. I don't know that it's going to be a huge priority from other sources as far as general funds to pick up another $900,000 or $1 million. So we'll have to see what happens in the budget, but I know staff will request that, but we may also just wait for more favorable building prices in the future. So
Let's wait to see what they present in the budget, from there.
Thank you.
So this will go on the
I think it has to go
action, so you can decide which one of the
Yep.
you want to reject, what you want to do.
Okay.
Sagwan action. This is going to be a very short consent agenda for next week. Isn't it going to be? It's going to be like this meeting all over again. All right. Item number 10, review bid results for the 2019 streetlight replacement project, 200 South to Monterey Drive.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
This one's within budget, Kit.
Yeah, your numbers are in there. The budget on this project was $380,000, and Blackburn Associates is the apparent low bidder, $369,628. So we're recommending Blackburn's to do the project for us.
Kit, are you good with that? I mean, that's quite a difference. I mean, those other two, I mean.
Yeah,
got
we're
everything
good with
handled?
it. Blackburn's is usually typically that way on our public works projects. So.
They're not going to come in and say, "Oh, we forgot."
No, they run a pretty efficient crew, and I'm not worried about it.
All right. Are there any other comments, questions? Can we put this one on the consent agenda?
Yes.
I think so.
And I would concur with that. Blackburn, they're a great company.
Okay. We'll put. So now we're at 2 items. Okay. Item number 11, city committee appointments. So we'll start with on the CATS committee. I'm recommending, we've had an SUU representative on there. She has moved. And so I'm representing Cole Gibson. He was actually recommended from SUU to be an individual. He works with alumni community, all of that. And then for city council assignments, Councilman Cousins for Rap Tax Art, Cedar Area Transit Committee, Frontier Homestead, Councilman Adams, Cedar City Disability Awareness Action Team, Park and Rec Advisory Board, the Rap Tax Park and Rec, and then he's going to sit in these two kind of fall under the Park and Rec Advisory Board, the Trails Commission, and Cross Hollow Event Center Committee. For Councilman Phillips, Downtown Parking Authority, Historic Downtown Economic Committee, and the Cedar City Historic Preservation Committee. For Councilwoman Hartley, the Airport Board, the Central Iron County Water Conservancy District, the Cedar City Iron County Economic Development Committee. Why we make the names of these so blasted long, I don't know. And the Regional Wastewater Treatment Board. For Councilman Isom, Planning Commission, Library Board, and Home Builders Government Relations Committee. Are there questions, comments? If not, are we good with that going on the consent?
Consent.
Oh,
Yes.
wow. We're going to end on a strong note there. And with that,
So move to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys were still shorter than mine.